Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are
above replacement radio.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Giant. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Kern. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing well today. We've had real baseball played in the last week. We're not talking about any of it today because, unfortunately, there are a lot of off-field things that have gone on since we last recorded. Most notably, a new MLB's latest scandal has opened up. It's only been 2.5 years since the last big scandal in this sport, so we were certainly due because we got to have one every 3 years or so. It's what it feels like. So we were due, and finally got it. It has to be a week before opening day. Obviously, it sucks that this is the last off-season pod of the year. It's supposed to be like one of the most exciting pods we do all year, and this is the number one story. But we were due. We needed it.
Indeed, yeah. Has to be the best player in baseball. Has to be the best player maybe we've seen in half a century, maybe full century. You never know. And just a generally beloved ball player. So yeah, happy to be talking about it. But yeah, so the news is, if you haven't heard, which I'm sure you have, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter was accused by Shohei Ohtani's lawyers of stealing $4.5 million in Shohei Ohtani's funds to pay off gambling debt. There's a lot of speculation into whether that's the actual story or not, whether Ohtani was actually paying him off, if Ohtani has any gambling connections whatsoever, which is something that which is an idea a lot of people are latching on to. What was your whole thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, so the reason there's so much speculation about this story is because there are so many questions. We're left with more questions than answers with the process of how this story was reported. And there's just so much that we can't answer right now. There's still so much we still need to learn. But basically, ESPN got a hold of some wire transfers that went from Shohei Ohtani to a man named Matthew Bowyer, who is the illegal sports bookie in this case. The important thing to note here is that sports betting is legal in many U.S. states. It is not legal in California. So that's a large part of why this is a story. MLB's gambling policy does actually allow players and employees to gamble on other sports. It just cannot be baseball, obviously. But of course, it is not legal in California. So that's kind of part of why we are here. What happened was ESPN got a hold of these wire transfers and wanted to talk to Ippei Mizuhara, who is the interpreter for Shohei Ohtani. He's longtime reported best friend. Really, up until we found out Shohei Ohtani was married, the only public figure that has ever really been attached to Shohei. So this is a pretty significant figure in the baseball world. And, what we know of Ohtani's life, obviously he's very secretive and keeps to himself. But from what we know, Ippei is his only friend, or at least what we did know before he announced his marriage. So what happened was ESPN requested an interview with Ippei, and Shohei's attorneys sent him in for a 90-minute interview without a lawyer, which when you're talking about a potential federal crime in this story, it is a wild choice to let someone go in for a 90-minute interview without a lawyer. This whole thing, all of this speculation, it could have been avoided if Ippei had just gone in with someone basically telling him what to say and speaking for him. But that's not what happened. Ippei just went in and said whatever he wanted to say. And what he said was that he had gotten in some gambling trouble. He was $4.5 million in gambling debt. He said that he was gambling on international soccer, the NBA, the NFL, college football, not baseball. And that he had gotten himself into that debt. Shohei felt bad for him and agreed to bail him out of this debt. And he sent the money over to Matthew Bowyer, the aforementioned illegal sports bookie. And the big one of the questions that people have is, how is any bookie gonna let someone get $4.5 million in debt? Because 99.99% of people will never pay that off. But when you have connections to Shohei Ohtani, that might be that leaves some leeway for someone to be like, hey, you know what, this person could do it. Especially because I think Ipe makes like 1% of Shohei's salary, which would certainly be able to pay off $4.5 million at some point. And then, as the story was about to be published, Shohei's attorneys went back to ESPN and disavowed everything that Ipe had said. And basically, they were like, yep, it turns out Ipe actually stole this money from Shohei. Shohei was not aware that these funds were taken. He had just found out that that money was missing. He did not know about Ipe's gambling. So the story changed. The story went from Shohei bailed out Ipe to Ipe stole from Shohei, and Shohei had no idea that Ipe had this gambling debt or that he used this money or whatever. And I think the leading theory among rational individuals is that Shohei possibly did know about this gambling. He sent over that money, and then after his attorneys realized how illegal it is, they changed the story to keep Shohei out of trouble. Because I'll be honest, I learned this week that it's illegal to pay off someone else's gambling debts in states where it's not legal. I'm sure a lot of people learned that as well. And that is the leading theory. There's certainly a lot of possibilities out there, but that is, based, it makes sense given the story change that that's what went on.
Yeah, that's interesting, and yeah, it's a solid retelling as well. Yeah, obviously it's a lot of speculation, which makes it such a weird story and makes it, and I think the speculation adds to the, adds to the, um, grandness of the story. So yeah, like, it seems like it could go in a lot of different directions, and yeah, it's weird because, like, if there is a legal issue, I imagine that like actual law will get involved, which would make it so that MLB doesn't have to get as involved, I would have to imagine. So I think that's kind of just up to like the state of California, I guess, in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I mean the MLB Department of Investigations is launching an investigation into this. I would imagine the Department of Justice on the federal level or the state level is probably doing something as well. Obviously, the big doomsday type theories that are out there are that Ipe and or Shohei was gambling on baseball, and that Shohei was the one placing these bets, and that Ipe was thrown under the bus to protect Shohei's image. Right now, I don't see any sort of evidence to back up any of that. I'm gonna let all of the information come in, as it gets reported. Obviously, Ipe was the one who said he wasn't gambling on baseball, and he hasn't exactly shown himself to be the most credible person, not just with his original story, but it's come out that he lied about the college he attended. It's come out that he lied about being an interpreter for Hideki Okajima back when he was with the Red Sox. Supposedly, he also lied about, I don't know if lied is the word, but I've seen reports saying that he claimed to have worked for the Yankees, but he actually did like briefly work for the Yankees, but was cut during spring training. So might be a white lie, might be a technical truth. If that's even true, I have no idea. I saw reports of it somewhere. But I think something that's important to note is that there actually is some kind of precedent for this. I don't think anybody like knew about this, but in 2015, Jared Kozart, the former Marlins pitcher, was found in violation of pretty much this exact crime. He was illegally gambling on sports that are not baseball, using an illegal bookmaker, and he was punished by Major League Baseball by given an undisclosed fine. And he was still allowed to pitch in the league. Nobody cared. Literally, like almost nobody knew that this actually happened. It was right before the 2015 season. And everyone, I feel bad for Jared Kozar because he probably thought he got away with it without anyone knowing up until this point where he's used as a precedent for the biggest star in the game. But as you know, if this is the precedent they choose to use in the possible event where Shohei Ohtani was gambling on sports using an illegal bookie and obviously not gambling on baseball, it seems like there's not going to be too much of a big deal in terms of a punishment here. Um, if that's the precedent they choose to go off of, if there are any differences between Shohei and Jared Cozart. Um, but again, right now there's no actual reason to believe Shohei was gambling or that anyone gambled on baseball.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, I don't know, like maybe my uh deal with like just morality in terms of like gambling or not. I typically don't really have much of a I don't really care too much of it as long as you're, of age doing it. So like I don't know, even if even if there was gambling on baseball, I don't think I'd really care, but I know the law, obviously um is disparate. And if Shohei for, if it's found that Shohei was throwing games, then yeah, there should be a great punishment with that. But yeah, I don't know, like it's yeah, it's just a story that no one expected to hear this week.
No, it wasn't. I mean, obviously, Major League Baseball has historically drawn a hard line on gambling on baseball. Everyone talks about Pete Rose, who was, the whole story with Pete Rose is that he originally denied it, and then he said, "Okay, fine, I did bet," and then, "Okay, fine, I did bet on baseball, but it was, during my minnow," and he kept changing his story over the course of several years until eventually it came out that he was in fact gambling on baseball while he was a player and a manager. So MLB drew that hard line of being banned from the sport for life because of it. Um, and I'm sure that is probably still the punishment to this day. I don't think there are any other reported examples of players gambling on baseball and getting punished for it, to my knowledge. Um, but just to combat the Shohei theories, the thing that I keep going back to is like what the only thing we really truly know about Shohei is that he is a very secretive person in terms of his personal life. He successfully hid his like many of the details of his free agency from reporters during the entirety of its process. Not only did he break the news, but he also had reporters saying that he was on a plane to Toronto when he was sitting at home. He hid an entire 3.5 year relationship turned marriage from the entire public when he announced it himself. Like the only reason we even knew he was married was because he posted it, right? Like if he didn't post that he was married, no one would know because he was able to hide that from us so successfully. So let's just say Shohei was illegally doing some gambling. He was breaking some league policy here. Don't you think he'd be a little smarter than to do it through the one publicly attached figure to him throughout his career? Like that's what I would think. I would think he'd be a little smarter than to launder his money through eBay, the one person that people know him to be attached to.
Yeah, 100%. Who, yeah, they interact on a day to day, sometimes, hour by hour basis.
Yeah, I mean like they see each other all the time. Like I don't know how many people know this, but during the lockout, Ipe quit his job as the interpreter for the Angels because MLB employees were not allowed to speak to players during the lockout, and he quit his job so he could remain in contact with Shohei, and then he got his job back after the lockout ended. So like this is a genuine relationship that has existed between the two of them. It's obviously, I think it's very sad that this friendship will clearly never be the same again, regardless of what the outcome may be here. Obviously the Dodgers fired Ipe, and it's either Ipe took a fall for Shohei or he went behind his back and betrayed him. Regardless of what happened, like it's never going to be the same. And I really do wonder if it's going to impact Shohei Ohtani on an emotional level and also like on a performance level.
Yeah. I mean, when you're playing a 162 game season and, you're in a country that you did not grow up in and you're, pretend, he'll have a translator, I imagine, obviously, but
I mean, there is another Japanese player on the Dodgers, so I'm sure there's an interpreter, right there at hand.
yeah, exactly. But still, like, he had comfort with Ipe for what his entire Angels tenure, right?
Even going beyond that, I saw a report that said they were friends since like 2013 or something like that. That's like
Yes.
Shohei's entire professional career because he was like probably in his teenage years at 2013.
Yeah, exactly. And he's in a new clubhouse, new teammates, new knew pretty much everything except for
Mhm.
state and city. But yeah, like yeah, it'll be an adjustment for sure. So we'll see how that affects him on the field. I'm sure he'll still be, good, but maybe not to the exact level that he would have been if this situation had not happened.
Yeah, and I mean, like Mike Trout has gone on the record said that his English is actually like very good. He just doesn't feel comfortable speaking it to reporters, understandably so, because I think that is a very different thing from just clubhouse interaction. So, like if he's able to communicate with his teammates, that's certainly a plus. It obviously is going to help that he has Yamamoto in the clubhouse with him, so it's he'll have someone who he can relate to and that speaks his native language whenever he feels like doing that. Um, but I mean, he's also in a new clubhouse for the first time. Like, I'm sure that can be very anxiety inducing, especially when you've been in the same clubhouse your entire major league career. Like, and not having someone like Ipe alongside you is probably going to be an adjustment for him mentally. Um, and yeah, I mean, the league launched its investigation. They put out the press release for it at 5:57 on Friday in classic news dump fashion. Um, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. I mean, I think as of right now, I don't think there's any serious reason to believe that Shohei will be in any like great danger. And I think the worst case scenario for him realistically right now is that he knowingly paid off his friend's gambling debts and maybe that is illegal, but I don't think people are going to see it as immoral, right? Like I don't think people are going to think less of him and think that he's a bad person for doing it because not that ignorance of the law is a good excuse, but it's a little more understandable and maybe a little relatable, and it's also just a very nice thing someone would be willing to pay off $4.5 million of someone else's gambling debt because that is very much not a thing he had to do.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, it sort of in a way, yeah, paints him in a good light, even if he's, bending the law a little bit. But yeah, if there's a problem with the law, then maybe the law will get involved. Who knows? But yeah, a lot of speculation. Anything more before we move on to the next bit of news?
I think that was everything. We'll obviously continue to provide updates as this investigation rolls along, as new information gets reported, because I'm sure we will learn more before the investigation is completed at this point, because new stuff is coming out every day. Like yesterday, it was released that eBay has a history of lying, um, which definitely I think makes Shohei seem a little bit better, knowing that eBay can't necessarily be trusted. But yeah, this whole thing could have been avoided if Ipe just went in with a lawyer. I don't understand why they allowed him to do that for a 90-minute interview.
Yeah, right. I'm excited for the new Ipe Lies because I imagine they'll just come strolling in.
Yeah.
I think that'll be fun to just like
I saw
continuously
one that said like Ipe has
refresh.
been like two kids in a coat this whole time.
That's great. So I'm excited for that. The internet will internet, so
Yeah.
that'll be fun. But away from Shohei Ohtani and on to another team in the NL West who just got an ace off the board, the reigning Cy Young nonetheless. Blake Snell, the Giants get him on a deal that no one would have predicted. It's a 2-year, $62 million deal with an opt-out, right? Opt-out after year one.
Something like that. Yeah.
I believe there was an opt-out after year one. Kind of similar to the
Yeah, 2025 player option.
Yeah, kind of similar to the deal they signed Carlos Rodon to heading into the 2022 season, except for a good amount more money. But yeah, Blake Snell has a little bit of a higher reputation, so it does make sense. But what do you think of this deal?
Yeah, the Giants very suddenly had themselves like a nice offseason. There was a lot of questions about what kind of direction they were going in. There were narratives about players not wanting to go to San Francisco, all of that fun stuff. But you look at some of the additions that they made late in the offseason, signing Blake Snell, signing Matt Chapman, signing Jorge Soler, signing Jung-Hoo Lee, trading for Robbie Ray, who, when healthy, can be a much more interesting pitcher. This team looks a lot more serious now than it did, even just like a month ago.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like, I think we kind of talked about how this could be potentially a big offseason for the Giants. And, you know, they did, I mean, with Snell now, they did get like probably a top 5 guy in the market. But they kind of supplemented that with a lot of like sort of, you know, mid market or like mid tier moves that are going to improve the team a good amount. Like, this doesn't have to necessarily do with Snell, but they kind of completed their outfield a little bit with Jung Hoo Lee being in center field instead of like Luis Matos now. Moving over Mike Yastrzemski to a more optimal outfield position for him. Jorge Soler adds a lot to that lineup that they didn't have last year. Like I imagine he'll do better than Mitch Haniger did for them last year. And then in the starting rotation, like we all know that Logan Webb is the ace of that staff. He'll continue to be that. But they probably needed a little bit more, and Blake Snell provides that. And I don't think anyone is thinking that he's going to be at Cy Young level this year, but he's probably going to be pretty good. Like, maybe you get 150, 160 innings out of him in a low to mid threes ERA, and that's very good, especially in today's game, where you're not obviously with Blake Snell, you're not guaranteed a ton of innings, but he's still he still might provide like 150, 160, even being new to the team, maybe even more than that. But yeah, like just very, very quietly, the Giants had a very productive offseason when like after an offseason in which they kind of had 2 swings and misses with Judge and Correa. They're kind of finally coming through and filling that payroll up a little bit.
It's interesting. One guy that I'm very excited to watch this year is one of the ARR favorites. We weren't able to talk about him in players to watch because he is currently on the IL. But when Alex Cobb comes back, he's going to have some defense behind him this time, right? Like you sign Matt Chapman to be your third baseman. Right now they have Nick Ahmed as their projected shortstop, who is not necessarily going to hit, but I mean, he's a great defender, right? Tyro Estrada had excellent defensive numbers at second last year. You get a full season of Patrick Bailey. Yeah, this team is going to be very improved defensively when you have a guy like Alex Cobb out there that, puts up a solid ground ball right every year. And that's another rotation option that gives you innings. You can't help but think, hey, maybe this team is a lot more interesting than we thought going into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And granted they finished below 500 but for much of the season they were in a playoff spot, especially down the line toward, I think it was until like mid-August where they were like in a second seed, and they did, their feet got kind of taken out from under them and they kind of collapsed toward the end. But yeah, like I think they're a very intriguing team. They just don't really have as many holes as they used to have. And like I can't really identify too much of a weak spot. I don't think they're really excellent necessarily anywhere, but I can't really identify much of a weak spot in the whether it be lineup, starting pitching, bullpen. They're all decent, at least average and in some cases pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree. There's definitely a lot to be excited about with this team compared to the way people were talking about them back in December or so.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of parallel, like I think a lot of people saw the Giants and like the Red Sox in very similar situations this offseason where it seemed like they had to, you know, use their financial flexibility to their advantage. The Giants have, the Red Sox have not, and I think we kind of see, when we're forecasting these teams, we kind of are a lot more optimistic about the Giants and what they've done, and sort of shout out to them also, just sort of taking advantage of a you know team slash owner friendly market this offseason. Like they got Snell for a 2-year deal with an opt out, and Matt Chapman on a 3-year deal with, I think, an opt out after year 2 or something like that. Like, I mean, they're taking advantage of a unfriendly player market, but it's working out for them.
I'm glad you mentioned the Carlos Rodon similarities because they're there. Like they definitely are there. Like he's coming off of a much stronger year, a short-term free agent contract with an opt-out after year one, lefty with a lot of strikeouts. Like
Yeah.
the similarities are there, and he had the best F4 in the league that year among all pitchers.
Yes, I do remember that. I do recall his FIP and how high I was on him in the following offseason, and then how much he flopped last year. But yeah, with Snell, I mean, it's unfortunate from a players and players union perspective that he kind of has to have another prove it deal. But looking at some of the underlying stuff, it does make a little bit of sense. If you wanted to make $30 million a year on a longer term scale, he would have had to have some really good underlying numbers along with his low ERA. But because his FIP and expected ERA were much higher, I think teams were a little bit more hesitant, along with the fact that he wasn't getting many innings per start, as he kind of famously or infamously does not really get many innings per start. So I think teams are, if they want to spend, more than $150 million from him, they want to see maybe his walks go down, innings per start go up, and just general peripherals get better. And I still think there's time for him to get a longer term deal, even that if that's a 4 or 5 year deal, because yeah, he's still in his age 30 or 31 season.
He is in his age 31 season.
Yeah, and pitchers are, a little bit more privy to get better deals toward the end of their career because they age a little bit differently than position players, or at least these days they do. So it might not end up being a disaster for Blake Snell, but he's got to pitch well again this year, which is kind of unfortunate for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I love it from a Giants perspective. Anything more on the Snell deal before we get into the predictions?
Now let's talk about some preseason predictions.
Yeah, it's kind of well, now that we've added the top 50 list and the positional rankings, it's not necessarily a full state of the union on what we think about baseball, but this is kind of a little bit of an annual state of where we think teams are, and in terms of projecting them for this year, and kind of what we overall thought of what they were able to do in the offseason, or how they're developing their players. So it's an exciting time of year. Weather's getting warmer. Leaves hopefully will start to appear on trees soon. But nonetheless, we break down each and every year where we think each team will finish in their division, give a little bit of a reason why. We'll also get into who we think is going to win individual awards at the end, and briefly go over our hypothetical playoff predictions with our standings predictions. But we'll go deep. We won't go too deep into that because that's very, very hypothetical, whereas this is not as hypothetical. But do we want to whip it around and start in the AL East?
Let's do it.
With the division in which our favorite team plays. Who do you have filling the last place spot of the AL East?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes without saying at this point. I have the Red Sox finishing in last. I think this team is interesting. There are a lot of, their entire rotation is based off guys with a lot of potential. They're bringing in a new pitching coach this year. They're bringing in a new Pobo that has, a pitching coach experience that did very well with the Cubs. So, there's a lot of interesting turnaround that can happen there. This is still a very strong looking lineup. The 7 through 9 is a bit concerning compared to years past, but there's still a lot of high scoring potential here. The bullpen, who knows? It's definitely a wild card, but the bullpen's always been a wild card with this team. But this is a division with 4 very strong teams, and the Red Sox are simply just not as strong as the others right now.
Yeah, for sure, and with the Red Sox, I think some people might be so down on them because of how disappointing the offseason was, and might be like, oh, they're going to be a disaster team. I mean, this team could be 500, and that's what makes this offseason suck. it's not like they're a lost team that it wouldn't have made sense to get, a big free agent like Yamamoto, Snell, Montgomery, Imanaga. It would have made sense. It would have propelled them
Yeah,
pretty
I mean,
close
like look at the way we just talked about the Giants. The Red Sox could have been that, and they chose not to.
Yeah, 100%. That's why this offseason was as disappointing as it was. They're
Mhm.
legitimately a couple solid moves away from being a playoff team, playoff contender. Um, I'm not sure top of the division, but like, yeah, a third place team in the AL East, maybe catch a 5 or 6 seed if they had just gotten maybe two good starting pitchers on the market. And I'm sorry, I'm not counting Lucas Giolito as that. That was kind of a I can fix him deal as we referenced before.
Yeah.
Um, they're going to be watchable this year. It's not like I'm going to dread watching the Red Sox this year.
Hmm.
They just won't be like very good. They'll just kind of be back and forth. I think that's maybe why Netflix chose them
I
as
was
the
gonna say
team.
not only are they gonna be watchable, but they're gonna be rewatchable on Netflix
Yeah,
2025.
you can watch their 79 and 83 season unfold on
You
Netflix.
can watch Alex Cora's farewell again
Um,
because Alex Cora is in his contract year. I feel like the way that the Craig Counsell situation was very foreshadowing with the Red Sox, where we essentially had manager free agency. Um, who knows what happens?
yeah, yeah.
But
And
yeah,
by the way, I meant to preface this by saying I do also have the Red Sox in last place.
yep.
Um, and yeah, going deeper on them, like yeah, they're going to be watchable. It's just not going to be that good. They're going to be more watchable than all the other last place teams. Like I would bet on Tristan Cassis and Rafael Devers having better overall offensive years. I think the potential of a full healthy year of Trevor Story is very exciting. The continued development of Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, Sedan Rafaela, and Wilyer Abreu, I think, is also exciting. I'm excited to watch those guys potentially keep improving. But overall, like, yeah, they were a couple solid moves away from being a playoff contender, but they lack the depth, they lack the star power. They could have fixed that in the offseason with some signings without sacrificing any prospect capital, but ownership has been very shy to spend money. We've known that for a few years. I think some fans are um, getting more open to the idea this offseason because they're doing it under a new um, chief baseball officer. But yeah, that's what's going on. That's why I think they're going to be last place finishers for a third year in a row. Um, do we have time to talk about your fourth place team?
How much time is left?
330.
Yeah, there's enough time. In fourth place, I put the Toronto Blue Jays. Believe it or not, they finished third last year, made the playoffs. Um, I can't help but feel like they maybe took a couple steps back this offseason. You know, they had a lot of underperformance in that lineup last year with Vlad, George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Alejandro Kirk, guys like that. They added 39-year-old Justin Turner to the offense. They re-signed Kevin Kiermaier, who will be excellent on defense, and if they're lucky, a league average bat. I like Davis Schneider. I think there's a lot of potential there, but there's a lot that this team needs to have go right. They need a resurgence from Springer. They need a resurgence from Vlad. They need a resurgence offensively from Varsho, like I mentioned, Kirk as well. Um, the rotation is fine, right? I mean, like Gosman's a legitimate ace at the top of it. You have solid, supporting cast with guys like Barrios, Bassett, Kikuchi. The bullpen, who knows right now? Unfortunately, Jordan Romano is out right now with elbow inflammation. He's probably going to be maybe not ready for opening day, but at least ready soon after. And the bullpen will be whatever it's going to be. I don't really know, to be honest. Um, I feel not as good about this team as I have in years past. I've normally been very high on the Blue Jays in preseason predictions, but this year I have them finishing fourth in the division.
And we stay matching so far with the AL East. I also have the Blue Jays in fourth. We've we've matched before. We've matched many times in the AL East, and we've both overestimated the Blue Jays the past couple years. So yeah, now we are laying the hammer down and putting them in fourth. But in my opinion, like I still think they're a playoff contender. It's just like this division is so stacked that
Mhm.
like, and I liked what the Rays, Orioles, and Yankees did in the offseason better than what the Blue Jays did. And yeah, the Blue Jays were an 89 win team last year. They were what, a 90 win team the year before. They just
Something
haven't
like
really
that.
performed to their full potential, and I don't see a reason for that continuing. I thought like they were going to sort of have some bounce back years last year, but that never really showed up. And so maybe that's just what they are. That's just they're they're going to flutter around 90 wins, maybe even below that. So I see similar results this year. They could sneak into a playoff spot once again, but I don't really have a lot of optimism on them really contending at all for that ALE spot. But who knows? Maybe this is the year for them. But I'm not gonna be wrong on them being at the top again. So enjoy fourth place in my predictions for this year. That's what you get for disappointing me 2 years in a row. Um, who do you have in third?
Yeah, in third, this is where I put the New York Yankees. Um, they obviously disappointed last season with an 82 and 80 record. This is probably the team I think with like the highest variance of possibilities. They could be a World Series contender. They could be under 500. I have them in between, finishing third in the American League East. Obviously they've desperately needed a bat not named Judge. They absolutely got that with Juan Soto. They also got a couple underrated moves like Alex Verdugo is going to be an upgrade over having to put Aaron Hicks out there for 100 games. They also got Trent Grisham in that deal, good defense, guy who hits the ball hard. Rizzo will be hopefully healthy for a full season. Volpe might take a step up. Obviously they need him to take a step up. Stanton, who knows? Who knows what Stanton's going to do? I think the supporting cast around Judge looks a lot better this year. Obviously, it's easy for it to look better when you have Juan Soto, but I think when you look at a lot of guys the Yankees gave a lot of plate appearances to last year, right? Like Jake Bauers was like hitting fourth for them for like a full month. They had like Oswaldo Cabrera have 330 plate appearances. He struggled. Harrison Bader got 310 plate appearances, and he drastically struggled. IKF 361, Bowers 272. Oswald Peraza had a 49 OPS plus and 191 plate appearances. They gave Willie Calhoun 149, Billy McKinney 147, Donaldson 120. Like there are a lot of nobodies that got far too much time for the Yankees in terms of actual results. Josh Donaldson's definitely not a nobody, but when you cover up the name and look at his stats, you'd be like, wow, who is this guy that they let bat 120 times that hit 142 with a 75 OPS plus? Why did that happen? And I think the Yankees' depth offensively is a lot better this year. Obviously, I mean, I've never been a huge fan of Alex Verdugo in recent years, but I can't lie, he's much better of an option than the guys I just listed. Right? He's going to be ideally an above average bat, slightly above average at best, probably. The rotation is a lot more shaky without Garrett Cole, certainly, but hopefully it's just a month to 2 months, as the doctors have said. I like the defense behind guys like Marcus Stroman. I think Clark Schmidt could take a step up. Definitely some question marks still, though, which is why I only have him in third.
Yeah, and yeah, what I'll preface with the AL East is like I had a really tough time ranking 1 through 3 who I think was going to finish where.
Hmm.
I think the Rays, Orioles, and Yankees are all pretty close in my mind. I have the Rays in third, and with the Rays, like you know, with the Blue Jays, I think it's natural. With the Blue Jays and Red Sox, I think it's natural to say like they're the best fourth and fifth place teams in the league in terms of our predictions. I think the Rays will be the best third place team in the league. Um, I think they'll win, at least 90 games this year. But I don't think they'll win. They won 99 last year. I don't think they'll get around there. I think they'll be closer to like 90. Think naturally there might be some regression with the team, considering for unfortunate reasons, Wander Franco is not going to be on the team this year, and then Shane McClanahan's out with Tommy John surgery, and Tyler Glass now is traded. So being without them is I think puts them behind where they were last year. And I think there were some guys that had some really good years last year that might not be able to stay at that level. Because I mean that team had a 114 OPS plus last year. Like that was hard to imagine them doing coming into last year. So we were all in arms about their pitching, but their offense ended up delivering. I don't know if that's going to necessarily happen at that level once again. And all that being said, I think they're still a really, really good team on both ends. And they just with the Rays, we all know like they're going to produce some random guys that just produce. So that's part of the thing is they're just a player, a production factory in terms of baseball. So yeah, I'm putting the Rays in third, but I'm not necessarily down on the Rays. Who do you have in second?
Yeah, I have the Rays in second. It is very unfortunate, obviously, that they have a full rotation worth of guys on the IL. I mean, if you look at McClanahan, Rasmussen, Springs, Boz, and Bradley, that's a top 5 rotation in the league. Unfortunately, all of them are on the IL, and we are left with Eflin, Savali, Littell, Pepio, and Alexander, which is still not bad. Definitely still not bad. I like 4 of those 5. Alexander, I know more as a reliever. I don't know how much he'll start for them this year, but I'm sure he's a guy that the Rays can do their little magic on and make a lot better. Obviously, it's very hard to talk about the Rays rotation because you simply never know who's going to stay healthy and who's going to find their way to get an elbow issue in June or whatever. So I will avoid talking about the Rays rotation other than right now on paper they look like a team that can compete. But offensively, they have Yandy Diaz in the leadoff spot, one of my favorites in the league. I think the most underrated hitter for sure, maybe one of the most underrated players overall. A lot of people like Richie Palacios as an addition they made from the Cardinals. If there's people see that as like the Rays continuing to possibly bully the Cardinals into giving them good bats. Guys like a Rosarena previously that they've gotten. Because the Cardinals very famously give up a lot of guys for nothing. Adolis Garcia, Zach Gallen, Sandy Alcantara, um, Randy Rosarena, and Palacios. A lot of people speculate could be that next guy. Um, offensively, there's a resurgence possibly coming from guys like Brandon Lau in a contract year, a Rosarena putting it all together, Paredes continuing to pull that fly ball as much as he can because that's just what he does. A lot of people think Caballero is another guy that can take a step up. Now that he's on a different team, the Rays will kind of find their way with him. Bullpen looks strong as always. Yeah, I mean, this is a team that just always seems to figure it out, and I felt weird putting him in third for that reason.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like the Rays, you can really never take their roster at full face value, whereas it's kind of easier to do that with like a team like the Yankees. That being said, I will talk about why I have the Yankees in second place. They are, once again, I feel like every year they're the division favorite according to like projections and stuff. But I don't know if everyone's picking them as the division winner. I have them in second place though, because I think there are just naturally supposed to be a good amount of bounce backs with this team, whether it be Carlos Rodon, like I don't imagine a 6.85 ERA once again. I don't know if he'll be ace level, but I imagine he'll do a little bit better than that. Nestor Cortez as well. I don't think he'll have an ERA near 5 again. I don't think he'll be 2022 level, but I think he'll find some sort of balance in there. And Rizzo, Anthony Rizzo was a below average bat that last year. It could be very possible that that's where he ends up, but I could see some improvement there. And then along with that, along with the bounce backs, they added some reinforcement, which was really good. As you mentioned, had a very good offseason by completing their outfield, not only getting Juan Soto, one of the best bats in baseball, but also getting, Grisham and Verdugo, some guys who are better than the outfielders they had last year. In fact, they had the lowest on-base percentage from an MLB outfielder. Excuse me. They had the lowest on-base percentage from an MLB outfield last year. I would imagine that drastically changes with Soto in there as well as Judge. Part of why they should have a better on-base percentage from their outfield this year is because Aaron Judge is likely going to play more than 106 games unless he finds another wall to run into. Hopefully not. Fingers crossed. But I imagine he's gonna he's going to play more than 106 games. And then along with that, like I really like even if their starting pitching staff doesn't necessarily work out, their bullpen is rock solid as always. Their bullpen is still one of the best in the league. So yeah, they're really solid there. So I think like what we're looking at with the 2024 Yankees is a much more complete team than 2023. They kind of filled all the holes that they had, and I really like what they're bringing to the table, as well as some potential bounce back seasons as well. So yeah, why do you have the Orioles as the AL East champions?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was not sure what to think about the Orioles pretty much up until they added Corbin Burns. That addressed the number one weakness with pretty much the number one available solution that was out there, right? I think trades definitely made a lot more sense for this team. They haven't, obviously they are selling the team, which is excellent, but they haven't really shown a willingness to spend a lot of money. And not only that, but there's a lot of money to be spent on guys that are currently in the organization, like Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, potentially others. So I think a trade for Corbin Burns definitely made the most sense. I really like, the way that he's probably going to pitch at Camden Yards. I think it's an upgrade from Milwaukee for him personally. I think Grayson Rodriguez is due to take a major step forward. I hope Bradish comes back from his injury and performs the way we expect him to. And that suddenly gives them a good playoff rotation. And you look at this lineup and you see the usual suspects: Rutschman, Henderson, Santander, Mountcastle, Mullins, guys like that. And you look towards the bottom of the lineup and see, you might see Ramon Urias at third base, but you know that he's going to be replaced by Jackson Holliday at some point. You see Austin Hayes in left field and you think maybe it's going to be Colton Cowser at some point instead. Or maybe Colby Mayo at some point instead. Because this team is completely loaded with so many different prospects that are going to be interesting to watch this year. It's hard to keep track of all the breakouts that can happen when you have, Jordan Westburg, Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Connor Norby, all of these guys that they don't seem like major prospects because they are just not at the top of the Orioles organization, but they'd be top prospects in a lot of organizations. They just happen to be in Baltimore. So, this is an exciting team. It's an exciting time in Baltimore. There's expectations for pretty much the first time. I know I said that last year, but now there's World Series expectations. And first play, anything less than first place is probably not a successful season for them, obviously, unless they make the wild card and go far there. But the division is right now what they got to be searching for.
Yeah, and I mean they've already won it, which was pretty crazy. And yeah, it's we both had them in last year, and it's the year we stop underestimating the Orioles. We didn't collectively agree on that before the show, but glad we're in a little bit of agreement there. Yeah, like the Orioles, sort of like the Rays, you can't even really take their roster at face value, because they're going to develop players very well. And with the Orioles, it's like, you take the Rays and their player development and you add a bunch of top 5 picks to their team. Like the Rays haven't been losing. The Orioles had a good stretch of losing, and then they drafted a bunch of guys, developed them really well, and now they have a really good product here with Adley Rutschman being a top 5 pick. I think Jordan Westburg was a top 5 pick. Gunnar Henderson they plucked right out of the second round, and they've developed him really well. So like lots of things are going well, and they have more guys that they're continuing to develop to develop really well. And the addition of Corbin Burns adds to that even more. Like they could have been a division favorite without Corbin Burns, but now they have Corbin Burns. It makes that Kyle Bradish injury look, give the rotation a little less of a blow. And I'm not necessarily like putting the Orioles. I'm not putting the Bradish injury against the Orioles too much, because with the Yankees, like they have Cole out for a month, so it's like that's kind of an equivalency there. And the Rays obviously have a bunch of starting pitchers out, so it's not necessarily a blow that I can necessarily put against the Orioles. So yeah, like they come in with a lot of talent there already, but some untapped potential that's there and will probably continue to develop. So gotta bank on the Orioles continuing to do their thing from a player development standpoint and just a general talent standpoint. All right. Now on to the American League Central, and we'll kind of snake it. So I'll start with the
Sure. Real quick, I do kind of just want to talk about it is so hard to overstate how good this Orioles farm system is. It might be the best farm system that we've seen in our time as fans. The Baseball America released its top 30 farm system rankings in the league the day after the Corbin Burns trade when the Orioles gave up two top 100 prospects or one top 100 prospect and a fringe top 100 prospect. And they still put the Orioles number one and said, and had to put a disclaimer, by the way, we are aware of the trade. The Orioles are still number one despite it. And that's an incredibly hard thing to do because it is a very competitive list. And to be able to trade those guys and still be the consensus number one, it takes a remarkably deep farm system, and that's what the Orioles have. Like, I just listed like five guys that could break out on the major league roster this year, and that doesn't even go into everyone that's in the system, doesn't go into pitchers that are in the system, guys that won't debut this year that will take steps up. It is so hard to overstate how ridiculous this development has been for this farm system in the last half decade.
Yeah, 100%. And like, something that people might get concerned about, like maybe this isn't talking about the farm system, but like Felix Bautista's not there this year, but like we kind of know that like the Orioles will find a solution at the closer role. And
I was just saying nobody was talking about Yennier Cano at this
yeah,
point last year.
yeah, 100%. He turned out to be one of the best relievers in baseball last year. So like, they'll be able to develop guys, find upside in guys, and create some good relievers as they've done the past 2 years. So yeah, on to the Central, where I will be putting the White Sox as the last place team. They're kind of the opposite of the Orioles. Like, not only do the White Sox look bad on paper, but I also have zero trust in their player development process. I don't think they're gonna get anyone to their full potential outside of maybe Luis Robert because he's so talented already. But yeah, most of the guys on their team don't even have a lot of potential, and I don't see the White Sox getting them to their full potential. So, I think the White Sox being a last place pick for me is a result of just bad team management and just hiring the wrong guys because they hired internally despite being a massive failure internally and causing them to be in a rebuilding mode very, very quickly after being in a win now mode and not really experiencing much of a win now mode. So yeah, White Sox, I think they're gonna continue to be a White Sox team this year. So, and they'll be around the same win total or maybe even worse than they were last season. Who do you have in last place?
Yeah, I also have the White Sox. You pretty much said everything that I needed to say. I'll go off of one major moment I had with this team that I think kind of solidifies what my takeaway is. Very quietly, the White Sox acquired Jared Schuster in a trade with the Braves earlier this offseason. I think Nicky Lopez was in the same trade. I don't remember the full details of it, but Jared Schuster this time last year was a guy that I was very interested in because he was the number one prospect in the Braves organization. It was the year after they had developed Spencer Strider as a non-top 100 prospect, who Jared Schuster also wasn't. The Braves have strong pitching development. They've developed Fried, they've developed Strider, just in the last few years, among others. And as the second I saw him go to the White Sox, I was like, oh, there goes all the stock I ever imagined putting in him because, he didn't quite develop the way the Braves had hoped last year. Um, and well, he's now going to the White Sox. So, very unfortunate for him there. I feel bad making this the whole thing about Jared Schuster, but it says more about the organization than it does him. I'm sure he'll find his own way to do what he needs to do, but yeah, the White Sox give me zero reason to believe that many people are going to take a step up. I did talk about Eloy Jimenez, and I am intrigued to see what he could do in a contract year. Obviously, Luis Robert is an exciting player. Um, I'm kind of interested in this rotation, not for it could be good standpoint. I'm just very curious to see what happens when you throw Garrett Crochet, Michael Soroka, Eric Fedde, Chris Flexen, and Nick Nastrini in a rotation. I think that'll be very fun.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I mean, not to mention like Paul DeYoung, Dominic Fletcher, Martin Maldonado, Nicky Lopez at the bottom of the lineup is rough, to say the least.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not really trying to win this year, and it's pretty obvious
What a
by
massive failure for the team that spent so many years building up what looked like it was going to be a dynasty type team, and they peaked at win the division once in a single playoff game.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Majestic fall from grace.
yes, exactly. But yeah, now on to my fourth place team, who is the Royals. Despite some weird internet optimism about them, I think you experienced that. I think you had an interaction with like Jolly Olive, right?
I did back in September, to be fair.
Back in September. And I mean, they did make some like the Royals did make some fun additions, but the reason I have them in fourth place is just because I'm so down on the White Sox. It's not because I think the Royals are going to be really sneaky at all this year. I see them being um, maybe the worst fourth place team out there. If I do say so myself, like obviously Bobby Witt Jr. he's going to be fun, but the rest of the team I'm not too sure about. I think like the full or actually yeah, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be fun. I think some full seasons out of Cole Reagans and Vinny Pasquantino should be cool. Like I don't know if Cole Reagans is going to be a sub-3 ERA guy um for a full season, but he could be a good pitcher that the Royals have, but he might be the only good starting pitcher that the Royals have. And then they had some fun additions with like Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo. Who knows how that goes? They're kind of veteran guys who maybe overperformed a bit last year, and yeah, Pascantino I think should be interesting to their lineup, but yeah, I'm not really too high on them. I just am higher than them. I'm higher with them than I am the White Sox. Who do you have in fourth?
I also have the Royals in fourth. The Royals are such an interesting team because I think a lot of people are going to look at this depth chart and think, Hunter Renfroe, Seth Lugo, Michael Waka, Will Smith, John Schreiber, Chris Stratton, some of the offseason additions that they made. And I think the analytics nerds are going to be like, MJ Melendez, Michael Garcia, Nelson Velazquez, Freddie Fermin. Cole Reagans, I think, is universal. Um,
Yeah.
Alec Marsh, maybe. He's looked interested in spring training. There's definitely a lot of interesting things about this team. James MacArthur looked like a pretty good closer for them at the end of last year. And I think, the Royals obviously have not been competitive since 2016, if you can call it that. Michael Massey is another interesting name, a second baseman that hit well for them last year. Unfortunately, he has a back injury right now and will start the season on the injured list. But it's hard not to want to be interested in this team because they have not been relevant for so long now. Um, Freddie Fermin's the guy that I think is the best defensive catcher in this organization right now. If you look at his numbers last year, he was pretty good, and he hit the ball hard as well. Doesn't help that they play in Kaufman, and it doesn't help that they're probably going to give Salvador Perez all the innings behind the plate again for the 15th year in a row. Unfortunately, but I still have the Royals in fourth. I've experienced Royals optimism before. They were my was it 2021 or 22 sleeper team? What was the
I,
year that they had that really good April? Was it 21?
I believe 21 because I remember talking about that in Abbey Appleton Hall. Shout out to Springfield College.
Oh, I remember talking about it in Weiser Hall. Also, shout out to Springfield College.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure 2021 was the year I was high on the Royals, and they did well in April and then fell back down to earth. So I've been a victim of Royals optimism before. I don't want, I feel like I'm watching everyone make the same mistake that I made 3 years ago. I still can't buy in yet. I gotta put them in fourth. But a full season of Cole Reagans will be interesting, and they definitely have a lot of names that can be interesting. I just named a bunch of them, along with some mid-tier free agents that they signed. But I don't know.
yeah, I think there's maybe a little bit of natural like excitement when the Royals might seem potentially good because of how exciting their 2014 and 2015 runs were. But
Mm.
But yeah, I mean,
They also have. I feel like it also helps that they have like a certified guy, right? Like
yeah,
I was
that's
listening. I was
true.
listening to Effectively Wild recently, and like Meg Rowley said, like every team should have like a jersey guy, where it's like you go into the team store, you know whose jersey is gonna be there, and you know which one you want. And not every team has that, but the Royals do. And I don't think every team in this division really has that right now. Like I don't know who that would be on the Tigers. I definitely don't know who that would be on the White Sox.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
The Royals have that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. That is an aspect that is cool. But ultimately, yeah, I think if like everything went right for them, they'd be sort of like the Reds were last year, where they're kind of like hoping to maybe get a 6 seed in the playoffs. But
Yeah,
I don't really. I think that's their full potential.
I was pretty down on them last year because what I said was, they have these interesting guys. When you look at Melendez, you look at Pasquantino, Nick Prado, but like what else? Like that's it, and that's not enough. Well, you trade for Cole Rakens, you trade for Nelson Velasquez, and like okay, and then Bobby Wood Jr. takes that step forward, and it's like, all right, you know what? Yeah, there is something there. I still don't know if it's enough because there's still too many like, well, if this guy does this, and it's like, but are they? Are they gonna do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they play in Kaufman. The slugging is very limited.
To have that to have the breakout that they're that some people are projecting them to have, they need to have like everyone perform to their full potential, where
Hmm.
that's just not realistic. And if they do that, then hats off. But it's just unlikely. Now on to my third place AL Central team. This was kind of hard to figure out where I would have who, but I'm picking the Tigers for this one, despite them finishing second last year and making some kind of improvements, or just having some young talent um, that is kind of exciting. And that's why I'm labeling them a trap sleeper team. I don't know
Oh, wow.
I'm if I'm gonna like um label them like label a lot of teams this way, but I think they're kind of a trap sleeper team. I think it's easy to get excited about them, and I get it. Considering all the young players that they are going to have more playing time this year. Like I'm excited to see more at bats from Riley Green and Kerry Carpenter. I'm excited to see more innings from Tarek Skubal. I'm excited for the return of Casey Mize. I'm excited for the rookie season of Colt Keith, especially seeing what he was able to do in some spring training and seeing his minor league statistics. That all being said, I think they're still relying on a lot of breakouts. And I don't think everyone is going to break out. I think there might be a little bit of regression from some of the guys that were good last year. And I think they also like overperformed the run differential a little bit last year too. Like I get that we're not big differential guys, but I think that does play a factor a little bit in like the next year's success. So yeah, I'm try not to fall into a trap there. But yeah, I mean, I will admit there's some fun things about the Tigers this year, and I kind of hope to be wrong about them. But um, I am putting them in third. Who do you have in third?
All right, my third place team is the Cleveland Guardians. I have them finishing third where they were last year. Um, I just still, I love Jose Ramirez, not as much as you do, but obviously that is that guy in that lineup. But everywhere else, I want a little more slug than that. Josh Naylor, definitely an underrated bat. They project him with a 473 slugging, and that would be excellent. But after that, it's Laureano, Will Brennan, Bo Naylor, Tyler Freeman, Brian Rocchio. I know Rocchio is a big name prospect, but uh, I I don't know how much I can expect from him out of the shortstop position this year right now. And then Steven Kwan and Andres Jimenez, they'll play fantastic defense. Ideally, they'll hit for average. They're not going to hit for power. I don't know. I just don't buy the power outage on this team right now. I know that it worked for them in 2022. I think 2023 was a more close reflection of what they truly are. The rotation is interesting for sure. Shane Bieber, he's not quite the ace that he used to be, but he's been going to driveline this offseason. So hopefully that will turn him around. I like Tristan McKenzie and Tanner Bybee. I'm an enjoyer of both of them for sure. I think there's definitely a case to be made that they have the best rotation in the big leagues. Unfortunately, Gavin Williams is going to be starting the year on the IL. He had elbow discomfort, which is like the worst thing that you could ever hear. Yeah, he is going to start the season on the 15-day injured list. Unfortunately, that was my player to watch, so have to wait on that one. The bullpen, Clase just hasn't been the same guy that he was in 2021. He's still been solid. He's still not giving up a whole lot of runs, but he just hasn't been as dominant as we once knew him to be. After that, it's a bunch of who knows. I know I've been a Scott Barlow guy in the past, but he's not his 2021 self anymore. And then who knows what you get out of the rest of that bullpen. I don't really know. But I really want to see this team hit for more power. I just don't really see it happening this year outside of Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor. And for that reason, I'm putting them in third.
Right. I missed who is starting the year on the 15-day IL.
Gavin Williams.
Oh, right.
My player to watch.
Yeah. Unfortunate. I have the Guardians in second place. Because maybe I'm expecting a little bit of a regression from the Tigers, but I'm expecting better years out of Andres Jimenez and Jose Ramirez. I kind of delved into Jose Ramirez's underlying stuff in the ARR top 50 and talking about how he had 5.2 more expected home runs than actual home runs, hit the top of the wall. So I'd expect some more home runs, maybe just better rate statistics in general from Jose Ramirez. So a good thing to be excited about. Also, like Tristan McKenzie should be pitching more than 16 innings this year, which is a major positive. Like he was a really good pitcher in 2022, just found some bad injury luck last year, and hopefully is gonna pitch some consistent innings this year, which you love to see. And not too much else to say about the Guardians other than I mean, they produce random guys a lot of the time, and maybe I'm relying on that a little bit too much here, but they're not really much of a different team than they were last year. I don't expect big things out of the Guardians, but I don't really expect big things out of much of the rest of the division either, outside of the first place team, but I'll get into them a little bit later. Who's your second place team in the AL Central?
Yeah, I am. I am going against what you said. I am taking the Detroit Tigers as my second place team in this division. They finished second last year, and I think they certainly got better, right? I mean, obviously Riley Green is expected to take a step up and be healthier. Spencer Torkelson, I think the rate stats will come. He got a bit unlucky last year in terms of the expected numbers versus his actual numbers. Part of that could be playing in Detroit. Part of it could be what else. He did pull 39.6% of his fly balls last year. So I am kind of just inclined to believe that he can take that step forward with power. You look at up and down the lineup. I would love to see Parker Meadows not hitting leadoff and maybe hitting lower in the lineup. I definitely would like to see a better leadoff hitter. Maybe it's a guy like Mark Canha who has a 362 projected OBP. I think that's a nice addition for them. They have Colt Keith, who is going to start the year in the majors and hopefully give himself more time to take that step forward. He was a top 100 prospect, pretty much a consensus top 50 prospect, I believe. I think there's a lot of untapped potential in both this rotation and this bullpen. Tarek Skubal obviously goes without saying. I think Jack Flaherty could benefit from that ballpark. I think Kenta Maeda can remain interesting. Casey Mize and Reese Olson, I think, are very underrated names. Casey Mize maybe not so much just because he was the number one pick, but coming back from the injury, I'm still excited. Reese Olson got some good strikeout numbers last year in the time that he spent up. And then you look at the bullpen, like Alex Lang was awesome last year. Jason Foley, I believe, was your player to watch. Is that correct? Yeah. Right. Shelby Miller had a good year with the Dodgers last year. Andrew Chafin. Like, there is a lot of potential in this bullpen. One thing that I'm excited about with this team is that they will most likely not be giving 105 2/3 innings to Joey Wentz to put up a 6.32 ERA. Shout out to my player to watch last year. It was only my player to watch because I wanted him to throw more cutters, and he didn't. Not to mention they have Sawyer Gibson Long. Unfortunately, he is on the injured list right now with a strained groin for his. But they have him for depth. They have Matt Manning for depth, who could take a step forward. They have guys like Justin Henry Malloy and Akil Baddoo as depth. Justin Henry Malloy, if you haven't looked up his minor league stats, I would recommend doing that on Baseball Savant, not just on Fangraphs, because shout out to Baseball Savant for adding AAA numbers. That was a guy that I was interested in as well. I think there is a lot of potential for this team, especially if Green and Torkelson take steps forward. You know, they could be those Jersey guys. You have Jace Jung in the minors who might be coming up this year. That would replace Gio Urshela in the lineup. I'm very high on Jake Rogers. I'm hoping Javier Baez can have at least like a 650 OPS. I know that doesn't seem like much to ask, but he was below 600 last year. Javier Baez doesn't even really have to be. I mean, I know that they signed him to be a much better bat than he's been, probably at least like a 115 to 120 weighted runs created plus bat. But with how much other guys there are in this lineup, you know, really he just has to be slightly above average with how good he is at defense, right? Like his defensive runs above average went from 4.2 in 2022 to 12.4 in 2023. He took a major step forward defensively. It came with a major step back offensively, unfortunately. But I still think that he can provide value for this team at the shortstop position while everyone else does the offense. So I have the Detroit Tigers finishing in second.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of variance with them. I'm trying not to fall like I remember how excited we were at the end of 2021 with them, and then they just didn't really
I
follow
forgot,
up
by the way,
effectively.
totally forgot to mention Jackson Jobe. I don't have you seen his minor league stats, Chris?
I've seen his minor league stuff. It looked really, really good.
I'm hoping they give him time this year. He hasn't pitched much above double A, unfortunately. He's pitched a total of, I think, one game in double A. But overall last year, he had like 10 strikeouts per walk.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And he rose very quickly. He played at 4 different levels last year.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, listen to this. In 40 innings pitched in high A, 12.15 strikeouts per nine, 0.68 walks per nine.
that's nuts. Yeah,
That's insane.
yeah, that's pretty nuts.
An xFIP of 191.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
did give up some homers, admittedly, but an xFIP of 191. So if they can get that guy in the rotation by the end of the year as well, like that's another name.
yeah, yeah. I mean, number 3 overall.
Especially if his problem is home runs, like he'll like Detroit a lot.
Right. Number 3 overall pick in 2021. Famously ahead of Marcelo Meyer, which could end up working out. Who knows? Hopefully not. And now on to who we both have as the AL Central champions, the Minnesota Twins. Looking at this roster, I think it's pretty cool with the Twins, and maybe the most optimism I've had about. Well, actually, that's not true. I had optimism about the White Sox in 2022, but like more optimism about the AL Central winner than I had last year. There's a lot of reason to believe this team will be better than it was last year. I mean, they won, 87 games last year. They were kind of middling most of the year, but I think there's reason to believe they could be like a 90-win team this year. I doubt that Carlos Correa will play as poorly as he did last year. I mean, like 1.1 win above replacement for Carlos Correa is just not something that really computes for me. So I think he will improve on that, even if he's not at an elite level. Also with the Twins, they're likely to get more games from Royce Lewis, Edward Julian, and Matt Wallner, who all had at least a 130 OPS plus for them last year. And then on the pitching side of things, despite losing Sonny Gray and Kenta Maeda, I think their rotation is in a pretty good spot with Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan, and my player to watch, Chris Paddock. So yeah, they're going to get some more playing time from guys who produced really well for them last year. And then I think just the rest of their roster is in a pretty good spot as well. So I think they're pretty much an overwhelming favorite, maybe not overwhelming, but a solid favorite for that AL Central top of the division spot. Why do you have the Twins in first?
Yeah, I mean, they were the best team in the division last year. I don't see any reason why a team has overtaken them in the last offseason, right? You expect a resurgence from Carlos Correa. You hope for a healthy year from Byron Buxton and a better offensive year. Definitely not something you can rely on, but certainly you can hope for it. You hope for a full year of Royce Lewis because he was awesome last year. You get a full season of Edward Julian. You get a full season of, um, excuse me, you get a full season of ideally Chris Paddock in that rotation in the 4 spot. Um, I think the Twins have the best lineup in the division. I think they arguably have the best rotation in the division. And I think they arguably have the best bullpen in the division. It feels like the most complete team in the AL Central. Does suck that Johan Duran will not be with this team very briefly. He's going to open the season on the 15-day injured list. Light of an injury, but it's certainly you want to be with that guy as much as you can because he is obviously a guy with electric stuff. There are a lot of prospects that I find interesting on this team that could get some time. One of them is Emmanuel Rodriguez. If he comes up this year, I know he's probably going to start in Double A. But if he can find his way to the big league roster by the end of the season, he was a really awesome offensive bat last year. He also had a walk rate like well above 20%, which was super cool. So if that's a guy that they can find time for, another guy that can put up some solid ABs for them and be an OBP guy, there's a lot to be excited about in Minnesota right now. They finally got over the playoff stigma from last year. They not only won a playoff game, they won a series. They also, even if they only won one game against Houston, it felt like they were very competitive in that series. They have a true ace, I believe, in Pablo Lopez at the top of that rotation. Shout out to them for probably winning the Luis Ariz trade. No one thought they could do it except for us. But yeah, I really like this Twins team right now, and I think they are still, by all considerations, the best team in this division.
Yeah, they like they kind of just a sneaky, weird young core that we didn't expect to see, which is pretty cool. And, Royce Lewis has formed into actual existence. I'm going to acknowledge him. He's a real person, and he might actually produce pretty well for the Twins this year. Yeah, let's start with who's your who might be your last place team in the AL West?
Yeah, there's no sugarcoating it here. I mean, we're talking about the Oakland A's, for now. Right now, this is like the saddest team ever. From a roster standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, and absolutely from a vibe standpoint. Like, how are you, if you're a veteran in this clubhouse, how are you supposed to lead this club right now, knowing, uh, with the season that you're about to go through? Like, you're going to play in front of 2,000 very sad fans a game, right? You're not going to win a lot of games. There's so much uncertainty around this franchise right now. We don't know where they're going to be playing next year. They could be well, they're not going to be in Vegas. They could be in Sacramento. They could be in Salt Lake. They could be back at Oco. We have no idea what's going on. The reality is the storyline around this A's team is just not around the product on the field. Obviously, it goes without saying that they're probably not going to be very good. They have a couple interesting names that could develop, Zach Geloff, Tyler Soderstrom, Ryan Noda, JJ Bleday, but who knows? Who knows what's going to happen this year? From an ownership standpoint, it's going to be a very unfortunate product to watch. I can't imagine what it was like watching the 2004 Expos, but I would imagine this is going to be quite similar in maybe even a worse way. But yeah, it's the unfortunate thing about this team is, we would love, as much as it hurt to talk about the White Sox and their bad on-field products, we kind of wish that's what we were talking about with the A's, but that's just not what this storyline is.
Yeah, it is a little bit more than that. I'll talk about why the Athletics are my last place team. Not really too much to get into. It's not a hot take by any means, and I think the reasons are fairly concrete. They're not trying to win. They haven't been trying to win since 2021, if you can call it that. I mean, financially they weren't trying to win, but they've also, since then traded away all their good players. And yeah, I mean, there's some players that might be, feasible to watch and cool to watch, like as mentioned, Zach Geloff. Ryan Noda is an interesting player. Brent Rooker is cool. Also, he promotes baseball savant stats on Twitter, which I think is
Yeah,
really
huge.
fun. That's the best contribution we've seen from an Oakland A in quite a long time. And then I think Mason Miller are both our players to watch, or both of our guy to watch, on the Athletics. Seeing a potential full year from Mason Miller should be interesting as well. But yeah, um, regarding the A's, yeah, there's really not too much else to go over. I mean, they're just not trying to win, and it shows. Who is your fourth place team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fourth and fifth are pretty much locks in this division. I am talking about the Angels. Um, I mean, look, the another team where the storyline around this franchise right now is simply not the product on the field. Unfortunately, the storyline is they let the thing happen, the thing that we all dreaded for so many years, the outcome that we all didn't want, in terms of results and in terms of outcome. Shohei Ohtani has left the organization for the next door neighbor. They left for the spoiled older brother, as you would say. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see what the Ohtani-less Angels are like in year one. But it's weird because you look up and down this lineup and you still see a lot of talent. You just don't think that they're gonna either play or live up to their potential because they just haven't in the past, right? Like Nolan Shonowell, you know, he's going to be playing in his first professional season and expected to be hitting ahead of Mike Trout. So who knows what's going to happen there? Anthony Rendon, the less said the better. Taylor Ward took a step back last year. Brandon Drury actually looked interesting last year. I'll give him that. Mickey Moniak, produced some good results last year, but had some very high BABIP luck. And then Logan O'Hoppe and Zach Neto, interesting names. Unfortunately, they both got hurt last year, but certainly both interesting. The rotation is a bunch of who knows. Um, so I don't think there's much need to get into that. The bullpen, same thing. Um, yeah, it's just hard to imagine this team finishing ahead of Seattle, Texas, or Houston.
Right, right. Yeah, the Angels, like, they were last year they were 73 and 89, I believe, and I think they were the same. That was the same record they had the year before too.
Yeah.
Um, and that was with an MVP caliber Shohei Ohtani, a guy who's worth about 10 wins above replacement, at least according to Baseball Reference, and then like 8 or 9 on Fangraphs. And now they have all the same problems they had with Ohtani, but now they don't have Ohtani. So it makes that situation look, even worse. At least now there's the thing where they're not necessarily don't have the stigma of wasting, an all-world talent, albeit they still have Trout, but not necessarily like, he's not, 2015, 2012 to 2019 Trout necessarily, at least in terms of overall production with health and um offense and defense and base running involved. But with the Angels, I just kind of breaking them down, I'd expect some improvement from the rotation, notably with guys like Patrick Sandoval and Reed Detmers. I still see them having some good potential. But other than that, I can't really see much else to be optimistic about, outside of the obvious star power of Mike Trout, and some cool things with like Taylor Ward and maybe Sean Well, but yeah, I'm pretty negative on the Angels overall. I don't really see them sniffing the playoffs whatsoever. So who is your third place team in the AL West?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like 1 through 3 in this division could be very interchangeable. Um, and this might come as a surprise, but I'm gonna go with the Texas Rangers in my 3 spot. World Series hangover has been real before, and maybe it hits them. I don't know. It's hard to say. The lineup looks awesome. I mean, the lineup looks great the same way it did last year, right? Like Semien Seager at the top, Adolis third. You're excited to see a full year of Evan Carter and the debut of Wyatt Langford, a guy that has performed well at every level he's played at. You could expect maybe a step up from Josh Young, Jonah Heim being solid, Nate Lowe when he comes back from his injury, and then Leody Taveras in center field for right now. But and as probably the worst, as is the worst player, quote unquote, in this offense, who could still be a league average bat and an excellent defender. However, I just don't love the pitching right now, right? DeGrom is not going to be pitching at all with an injury this year. Scherzer's on the IL as well, but even then, Scherzer wasn't really all that fantastic last year. I mean, the strikeout to walk numbers were certainly there, but he was giving up a lot of home runs. He just wasn't the same guy that we're used to seeing, and I don't know. I don't know what to think of Max Scherzer right now and how reliable he could be, but you never really know with Nathan Eovaldi because he always seems to either outperform his expectations or underperform them. He never really seems to uh, be exactly what we think he is. Right now, he's projected to be a 4.18 ERA pitcher with solid strikeout to walk numbers, but maybe not as much from the home run perspective and the run prevention as well. You look up and down this rotation right now, and it feels like a bunch of 2, 3, 4 starters, right? John Gray, Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunning, and Corey Bradford. Um, you know, obviously they, were expecting to have DeGrom and Scherzer at various points. Well, not either at the same time at any point, but they're not going to have either for seemingly the majority of the season. And I don't know how that's going to line up against, the Houston lineup, the Seattle lineup, and whoever else that they're going to be facing. And in the bullpen, there's not a single guy where you're like, yeah, that's the guy right there, right? They just signed Michael Lorenzen to a pretty good deal, who was shaky at the end of last year after his no-hitter. Jose Leclerc was solid in the playoffs last year. I don't know if that's going to translate to the regular season. It could, but I don't know if it's going to. The only, I think my favorite bullpen guys here are Josh Sborz and Brock Burke. But I don't think any of them are going to be closing to start the year. So I don't know what to think of this team. The offense looks solid. It looks as good as it did last year. And, certainly seeing Langford and Carter is going to be very exciting. But the pitching does have me a little worried, especially without Montgomery to at least be that fifth guy.
Right. Yeah. I thought I was going to be the one delivering the semi-hot take here, but I also have the Rangers in third. It's kind of easy to forget, and like with the World Series and everything, it's kind of easy to get lost in the sauce with that. But like, let's not forget they only finished 2 games above the Mariners last year, who, Mariners weren't even kind of the real versions of themselves until like mid-July. They were kind of just middling until then, but that's not to take away from the Rangers and how successful they were last year. I mean, obviously earned that World Series title. But you mentioned the World Series hangover, and I did a little bit of research here. It kind of hasn't been since the 2018 Astros that a reigning World Series team has started out particularly well. Obviously, the 2019 Red Sox and 2020 Nationals never really got going. The 2021 Dodgers started 18-17. The 2022 Braves were below 500 until June 4th, and the 2023 Astros started 20-19. Meanwhile, you remember the Rangers last year, like they really needed that amazing start to even get to the playoffs last year. They started out really well. I think they were 25-15 to start the year. And I don't foresee that happening this year. And I think part of that has to do with just overall vibes, not even just analyzing their roster and whatnot, but analyzing the roster a little bit. I also see a lot of questions in their overall pitching staff, whether that's their starting rotation or that's their bullpen. Scherzer being out is not good for the team. Jordan Montgomery not being on the team is going to be a significant subtraction for them. And then also they were 24th in bullpen ERA last year, and they didn't really do much of that. They didn't really do much to fix that. I think the consensus was that they were going to get Josh Hader, and they never ended up getting him, which might kind of bite them in the rear end, especially with him being in the division now, facing them. That all being said, I still like their lineup. I still think that lineup is going to stay good with full seasons of Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford, and I think they're going to be a playoff contender. I just don't think they will be as good as the Mariners or Astros, as you believe as well. Who do you have in second place in the AL West?
Yeah, you mentioned the Rangers in third as the semi-hot take. I'll give the true hot take of this division and put the Houston Astros at number two. I think it's pretty safe to say this is the weakest the Astros have looked going into a season in this championship run. Regardless of if you think they're going to win the division or not, there's a lot of question marks. Not in the bullpen, I'll tell you that. Josh Hader, Ryan Presley, and Brian Abreu are great. The lineup still looks solid as always with Altuve, Alvarez, Tucker, Bregman. Potential full season from Yainer Diaz, potentially more from Chas McCormick, who looked good last year. But I can't overlook this rotation right now, Chris. Framber Valdez is going to still be leading right now. They will be without Justin Verlander for, do we know how long right now? Okay, maybe not too much, maybe not too long. He's going to throw a live batting practice session at Minute Maid Park Monday or Tuesday. So they'll be without him for at least a couple turns in the rotation, I would imagine. But I do want to talk about Framber Valdez because we have praised him as the ground god on this show, and he still is, and I'm sure he still will be this year, but there are steps back that he's taken. If you look at his sinker, it had 27.2 average inches of drop in 2021, the year that he had 70% ground ball rate. It dropped to 20, and then that fell to 24.2% of average inches of vertical drop in 2022, and then to 20.5 in 2023. His sinker actually had below average drop, which is not something you'd ever think you'd hear out of Framber Valdez. And the real issue with the ground ball rate shrinking to only 55% last year, and I said that sarcastically, is that his secondary pitches didn't exactly do the work that they used to, and his sinker didn't either. The launch angle on his sinker has gone from -9 to -6 to 4, right? Like, he had no pitches with a below league average launch angle last year, and that's what he's been known for. So if he's not going to be giving up ground balls at the incredible rate that he has been, I worry about regression for him. His fly ball rate went from 10.6% to 18.5% last year. His line drive rate went from 19.5% to 23.9%. And you follow that up with Christian Javier, who struggled last year, Hunter Brown, who didn't take the step forward he was supposed to, and then Ronel Blanco and JP France. And, I have faith that maybe those first three can bring back that potential. I don't feel so good about Ronel Blanco and JP France getting regular starts for this team.
Right. Yeah. JP France was a classic. Like, he has a good ERA, but everything else is else is not looking fantastic for him. I am I'm keeping it cool in terms of takes and talking about the Mariners being in second place. And yeah, much of my notes as to why I'm talking about them in second place are positive because, like, I have them above the Rangers, the defending World Series champions. And yeah, with the Mariners, like, there are definitely some obvious question marks about their offense, but I think it's, not a hot take to say they have the deepest overall pitching staff in all of baseball. For example, they were the only team last year to be top 5 in both starter ERA and bullpen ERA. And they didn't really take away from that pitching staff much at all. I think the only real significant piece of either of them were that was like Justin Topa, I think, was like the biggest reliever to go. But that being said, like, yeah, they were only 2 wins behind the Rangers and Astros last year. And I think there's an argument to be made that they are more motivated than both of those teams. I mean, both of those teams have won World Series in the last 2 years. I mean, they're the last 2 World Series champions. So, I think the Mariners are motivated to join them. That's not necessarily an analytical thing. I don't have any insight to the Mariners clubhouse, but that's just a feeling I might have. So yeah, talk about why the Mariners are your AL West pick.
Yeah, so it's been a roller coaster for the Mariners ever since the regular season ended last year. You had Jerry Dipoto making that 54% comment that, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Timing wasn't right to say something like that right after missing the playoffs in a year where you were supposed to be a World Series contender. But it's set from Ryan Divish went on Effectively Wild this week and talked about some of the unfortunate things that happened with the Mariners this offseason. Their TV provider suffered a bunch of financial issues to where they had to raise the price of its package this upcoming year, which also rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. But because of that, the Mariners were expected to go into this offseason ready to spend some money, but because of this TV thing, they weren't able to because major league teams get a lot of revenue from their TV deals. So the ownership came to Jerry Dipoto and said, "Hey, so we can actually only raise the payroll by like a couple million this year, so you have a lot more limited stuff to work with." Hence why the Eugenio Suarez trade, which saves $7 million. Hence the Jared Kelenic trade. So Jerry Dipoto was working on very limited resources this offseason, and I still kind of like what he did. Bringing in Jorge Polanco in a trade, signing Mitch Garver, bring back Mitch Haniger, I think is going to be huge for the vibes. Like, even if he's not the guy that he used to be, I think having him around like matters for this team. I kind of feel like maybe they would have made the playoffs last year if he was around. Not to mention the best rotation, arguably, in Major League Baseball. I mean, a pretty complete 1 through 5 with Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, Miller, and Wu. Unfortunately, Matt Brash is starting the year on the IL, but their bullpen always seems to figure it out. Andres Munoz is still an excellent closer. They still have Gabe Spire. They added Trent Thornton. They have Taylor Saucedo, who were all excellent last year. They added Ryan Stanek. So there are a lot of interesting names in this bullpen. And one thing I love about this team, I mentioned they led the league in pulled fly ball rate last year. I think they're going to do a lot more of that this year because all of the additions reflect that, right? Like Jorge Polanco, guy with a high fly ball rate, guy with a high pull rate. Same thing with Mitch Garver. They're going to give more time to Dominic Canzone, who I think does that very well. I'm hoping Ty France went to Driveline this year, and he was one of those classic showed up to spring training in the best shape of his life guys this year. So I'm hoping for a resurgence from him. Josh Rojas doesn't hit the ball super hard, but does pull it a lot, does hit a lot of fly balls. So that's clearly what they're going for this year. They're going to strike out a lot, but I really like the idea of just putting as many pulled fly balls in the air as possible, because that's where the game is headed. And the Mariners are ahead of that right now, and I think that's gonna be what leads them to a division title this year.
Yeah. I mean, good to see us both being optimistic about the Mariners. Because yeah, they kind of they looked like they were having a bad offseason, and then they kind of brought some hope back and some optimism back toward the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thread, like the foolish baseball thread from a couple of years ago where it was like, is Andrew Heaney good? Thread 1 out of 83. That's like, was the Seattle Mariners offseason good?
Yeah.
Well, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, we don't really know. But yeah, they're don't sleep on the Mariners for sure. Although I do have the Astros in first place in the American League West, for a variety of reasons. First of all, they're kind of returning a very similar roster to last year's roster, which was a very good roster. And they also added Josh Hader, which is cool. I don't think it'll have a crazy impact because he's, only going to be pitching like 60 innings, but it's a cool addition to have. Along with that, arguably their two best bats, and statistically their two best bats, did not qualify last year for plate appearances due to injury. Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez both had less than 500 plate appearances. I'd expect that number to increase this year, which is going to help them out tremendously. Having more Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez plate appearances should work if they do end up being healthy. And Altuve's injury was more like circumstantially got hit in the World Baseball Classic. Like, that's not an injury that's supposed to necessarily linger. Along with that, they should be expecting more playing time for Yainer Diaz and Chas McCormick, who both had really good offensive breakouts last year. And I also see some potential bounce backs for Jose Abreu. Like, I don't think he'll be, White Sox Jose Abreu, but I could see him being an above average hitter once again. I could see a potential bounce back from Christian Javier. Like, I still remember how great he was in 2022. And I could see some improvement in general development from Hunter Brown. So like they went 90 and 72 last year. And I think that was almost their floor. So I think there could be some bounce backs, and Generally more playing time from some guys who either got injured or maybe just unfairly kept on the bench for longer than they should have. So yeah, that's why I have the Astros. I think they'll continue to be the class of the American League West. But yeah, now on to the National League, where I will start with the last place team in the NL East. This is kind of where I might have a little bit of a hotter take, but I have the Marlins finishing last in the National League East. And I kind of figured I wanted to make some more aggressive picks because that's what happens in baseball. Like sometimes things just go unexpectedly. So this is one thing where I'm kind of trying to expect the unexpected. And that's what's happening with the Marlins. First of all, they're entering the season with a very injured pitching staff. Sandy Alcantara is not pitching this year. Yuri Perez has elbow inflammation, which is horrible, horrible news because we know the potential implications of that. Braxton Garrett is also in the IL. He should be joining kind of like in April, but not a good sign that he's starting the year on the IL. And then along with that, they overperformed quite a bit last year. I mean, no one predicted them as a playoff team last year, but along with that, they outperformed their Pythagorean win-loss by 9 wins last year and were 33 and 14 in one-run games. Although I don't, live by those numbers, like it's religion. I do kind of take those into effect and realize, yeah, they're not going to be that good in one-run games again this upcoming year, and they're probably not going to outperform their Pythagorean win-loss by that much again. And it's just because, yeah, they scored a good amount runs less than they allowed last year, and that's typically not a good sign looking at teams in the next season, especially when your starting pitching staff is as depleted as it is currently. Along with that, in regards to their offense, I do like the idea of having full seasons of Josh Bell and Jake Berger. That should help their lineup out, but also they're going to be missing Jorge Soler, who was their best hitter last year. He was let go in free agency. So yeah, I'm kind of down on the Marlins this year. I think last year was a real positive year for them, but just not necessarily sustainable in my eyes. Who do you have in last place in the NL East?
Well, apparently no take is too hot for this podcast because I also put the Marlins in last. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you see the vision as well. Yeah, this is a team that overperformed last year. And I won't go too much into what you already said, but yeah, the pitching staff is in shambles right now. Jesus Luzardo is a good pitcher at the top of the rotation. After that, you have AJ Puck, who has never started in the major leagues before or has limited experience doing so. Ryan Weathers, who previously was an interesting guy with the Padres that they let go of. Trevor Rogers, who unfortunately hasn't performed since 2021. And then Max Meyer, who is making his major league debut. So, I mean, good for him on being on the opening day roster. Happy for him. He's been a top prospect for a while. Actually, he won't be making his major league debut. He did pitch for them 6 innings in 2022. He'll be making his 3rd career start, I guess, coming back from Tommy John, it looks like, because he didn't pitch at all in 2023. Outside of Luis Arraez and Jake Berger, I really don't love this lineup. I've been a Jazz Chisholm denier for quite some time now, unfortunately. And Josh Bell, I want to love him, but he's gonna have that ground ball issue. Tim Anderson did not look good last year, and then Jesus Sanchez, if he can pull his fly balls is interesting, but who knows if he's going to or not. Yeah, I don't know. There's way too many holes for me on this team, and I don't love a lot, but yeah, I am putting the Marlins in 5th as well.
Yeah. Look at us. Just the temperature is rising is throughout the proverbial podcast studio.
Mm-hmm.
In 4th place, I have the Washington Nationals. I don't really have too much to say on the Nationals. Like they're still in rebuilding mode. I think it's kind of fair to say that. I do like some of the strides they made last year, some of the development they've had, some of the additions they made over the past offseason. Like they signed Joey Gallo, who, is always like, he's always full of potential,
The
even
most
though
hated man by fans that collect AARP.
yes, that is true. That is true, but he could be an overall positive for the Nationals this year. Um, I also like with the Nationals, like some of the guys they have coming up. We could see some James Wood action, even some, Dylan Cruz action. Who knows this year? So that could be a positive for them. But that being said, I don't think they're a contender this year by any means. I see their win total being in the 70s this year, like it was last year, maybe even below that. Who knows? But I think I think they're not necessarily a contender, but I do like them more than the Marlins this year. Who do you have in fourth place?
Yep. I think after this, it's pretty straightforward in the standings, unless you have a scorching take out here. But I also have the Nationals in fourth. They just announced Josiah Gray is getting his opening day start. Good for him. I would love to see what this team can do once they're finally out of the Corbin and Strasburg contracts. Strasburg is still on the 40-man roster, but I'm not misremembering that he did like retire last year, right?
Um,
Like that
I-
was a thing that he did, right?
we talked about him extensively. Yeah, I think he did retire. Yeah.
Yeah, because normally when you retire, you leave the remaining money of your contract on the table. I think he's just straight up being like, by the way, you still owe me this. I'm not coming back though, because he is still on the 40 man. He is still owed 35 million for the next 3 years. Patrick Corbin is on the last year of his contract. One of the
That's great.
worst big name pitcher contracts ever signed outside of 2019. That was a good one for them, but um, this is a year where I think the Nationals are going to start to see who they are in their next phase of competitiveness, right? Like they already have a couple interesting names. They've locked up Ruiz long term. Lane Thomas looked interesting for them last year. They're hoping CJ Abrams can take that step forward. They have veterans like Jesse Winker and Joey Gallo to kind of lead the younger guys forward. I'm hoping to see a step up from Mackenzie Gore this year. I think we all kind of need to see it for sure. And then yeah, you could have some James Woods, some Dylan Cruz coming up, maybe some Brady House. If he's up this year, that could be very fun. Um, and yeah, I mean this is a team that looked interesting last year. I mean they weren't as for a team in their first full year without Juan Soto, they won like 10 or more more games than the year before. So credit where credit's due. They did kind of overperform their expectations last year, but yeah, I do have the Nationals finishing in fourth in 2024. Unfortunately, they did put Jose A. Ferrer on the 60-day IL, so there goes my player to watch.
Well, wait, is he a pitcher?
Yeah,
So he'll have a 0 ERA for a very long time. So
true,
that is very good. Um,
true.
yeah, the Nationals they're cool. And they had like a 30-game stretch where they were like a top 3 team in baseball. Like I think they won 20 out of 30 at one point last year. It was such a weird time. Um, but as far as my third place team goes, um, not shocking anyone here too much, but I have the Mets, who, like, I don't have them necessarily as a division contender, obviously, as I have them third, but I think they could knock on the door of the wild card for sure. It seems like they had too many down years to be as bad as they were last year. Or they had too many down years to continue to be like a 75 win team this year. I'd expect better seasons from Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, and Starling Marte. Even if they're not necessarily at an elite level, I expect them to be better. I also am excited for potential quality development of especially Francisco Alvarez, but also even like Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, I think could be better. They came up as top prospects, so I think the Mets can maybe tap that potential, especially with maybe some new player development with a new GM in David Stearns. That's his name, right? I kind
I
of
believe
blank.
he's the Pobo.
Yeah, president of baseball ops, which is even better for them. Um, and then yeah, with the Mets, why I don't have them higher and toward their 2022 level of success is I think there's a solid amount of question marks with their pitching staff, and they didn't really supplement that in the offseason. They didn't go out and get, Yamamoto like some people had them getting. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll be better than last year, but maybe somewhere in the middle of where they were last year and where they were in 2022. But I do have the Phillies and Braves finishing better than them. Who do you have in third?
Yeah, I also have the Mets. One thing that's very funny, Fangraphs has JD Martinez projected in AAA for them start the year. Like
Yeah,
I was looking at their depth chart. I was like, wait, where is JD? They did just sign him. Is he hurt? No, he's not. And then at the top it says JD Martinez option to minors. Uh, although the transaction update is listed on March 28th, which has not happened yet. So Fangraphs might have the script. Although the opening day roster is definitely due before opening day. So I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, yeah, I mean, my concerns also go back to the starting pitching. I think the Kodai Senga injury really exposed how limited this rotation is right now. Quintana's an interesting starter, and he did pretty well last year after he came back from his injury. But after that, it's Luis Severino, Tyler McGill, Sean Manaea, Adrian Hauser. Not really a single guy you can rely on in that rotation. And in the bullpen, you're getting Edwin Diaz back, which is awesome. And who knows what you have beyond there. The lineup, I think, should be fine. I mean, especially with JD, they need another power hitter. They're certainly hoping that Francisco Alvarez takes a step up this year. They're certainly hoping that Pete Alonso can turn it up in his contract year. Brett Beatty could take a step up. So yeah, I mean, it's a team with a lot of interesting parts, but also a team with a lot of concerns. And I think it's an appropriate third place team considering this division. They're not the bleakness of the Marlins and the Nationals, but they're not the I don't want to say super teams, but they're not the well-rounded machines like the Phillies and Braves.
yeah, absolutely. So now I get into the second place team in my NL East. I don't really have too much to say on these two teams. I have them as the same order as they were last year. I have the Phillies in second. What's funny about the Phillies is they're returning about the same exact team. I think they lost Craig Kimbrell. They lost Rhys Hoskins in free agency, but they didn't have Rhys Hoskins in their lineup at all last year because he was injured. But so yeah, like they re-signed Aaron Nola, which was a positive. Extended Zach Wheeler, who they knew they were going to have this year, but extending him is a good, step for the team. I think with the Phillies, it's natural to expect some more overall production from Bryce Harper this year. He's going to be healthier. He's probably going to be playing more games, and he's going to be also producing defensively, which he wasn't really doing much of last year. It's also natural to expect more overall production from Trey Turner, who shouldn't be on a epic slump for 4 months. Who, hopefully that doesn't happen.
Better not be.
Better not be, as he is on Team Daniel this year.
Yeah.
But and then I also would expect more overall production from JT Realmuto. I don't know if he'll be like an MVP vote getter, but I expect him to have more than I think whatever he had, like 1.5 wins above replacement.
Like -9 framing runs as well.
Yeah, I expect some regression.
That was weird.
Some regression to the mean there because he was an absolute elite catcher in 2022 and even before that. And then last year just randomly dropped off in a lot of categories. But based on the Phillies staying about the same, I expect them to deliver similar results, which is, like around 90 wins, wild card spot, second place in the NL East. Who do you have in second place?
Yeah, I also have the Phillies in second. It's pretty, I mean, the after you get through, fourth and fifth, the division's pretty straightforward in terms of projections. Yeah, I also have the Phillies in second. For pretty much all the same reasons you said, their lineup is solid, but not as well rounded as the Braves. The rotation looks interesting. The bullpen looks interesting, but I mean, when you look at the quality of the players, the Braves have a couple superstars in that lineup, and the Phillies have some excellent guys as well. But it's hard to see them competing with the team ahead of them in these projections. The Bryce Harper at first experiment for a full season is going to be very interesting. I'm interested to see if Alec Boehm takes a step forward, if they decide to move on from him. I don't really know who they move on with, but they did sign Whit Merrifield over the offseason. So that's a potential option. I'm interested to see what this rotation does behind Wheeler and Nola because their options as of right now are Ranger Suarez, Spencer Turnbull, Christopher Sanchez, as well as Taiwan Walker, who's injured, and possibly Andrew Painter. He's probably going to need some time because he's coming back from Tommy John surgery. But other than that, this is a team that I think will finish in second in this division.
Yeah, it's fairly straight up, and I'll continue that with the Braves, who they had the best record in baseball last year, 104-58, and didn't really lose anyone too significant. They lost, I think their most significant loss was Eddie Rosario. They replaced him with Jared Kelenic, who might even be better this year. I mean, he had a better OPS plus than Rosario last year. So yeah, I mean, Kelenic has that upside, and they didn't really give up too much to get Kelenic, which is pretty cool from a Braves perspective. Also added Chris Sale, which when he's on the mound should add to that rotation, especially as a guy who's not going to be relied upon as a head of the rotation. He'll be like the number 4, number 5 guy potentially. Full year of Max Fried is pretty cool. Hopefully they get that. And yeah, like there's really nothing that points in the direction of them really regressing too much. So unless some surprising things happen, I don't see them I don't see them being removed as the NL East champions. And this would be, if they do win it, it would be their 7th in a row? Yeah.
Yeah, because it started in 18.
Yeah, it started in 18, continued it. Yeah.
They'd be like halfway to their 90s and 2000s run.
Yeah, which is pretty nuts. Yeah, so I got the Braves winning. You got the Braves winning. Why do you have the Braves winning?
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much goes without saying, right? This is a star-studded lineup from 1 through 9. The easiest out in here is maybe Orlando Arcia or Jared Kelenic, which is not good because those are, guys with league average floors maybe, or at least near league average floors. This rotation, I think, looks a lot more complete than it did last year. You obviously have Strider and Fried, 2 legitimate ace-type pitchers. You add Chris Sale, who, if healthy, could be great. You have Charlie Morton, who's continued to remain consistent. And in the 5, currently it's Ronaldo Lopez. They do have some other options with AJ Smith-Shawver, with Oscar Yanoa, Hurston Waldrop, Bryce Elder, who famously led the league in ERA for a while last year. The bullpen also still looks very solid. I mean, obviously Raisel Iglesias will be closing games to start the year. You have Mentor, who I think is very underrated. Joe Jimenez, Pierce Johnson came from Colorado and looked really good for them last year. A lot of people didn't pick up on that. Aaron Bummer coming over from a White Sox team that didn't know how to use him. I think that will be very exciting, like I mentioned in my players to watch. This is a team with 100-win upside. Feels like their floor is like 95, honestly. And yeah, I don't know. It kind of goes without saying.
Right. There's actually, I think it's funny to point out like how many good players the Braves as a whole had better like OPSs or OPS pluses than. The Braves as a whole had a better OPS than Jose Ramirez, Christian Walker, Brandon Nimmo, Marcus Semien, Pete Alonso. I believe they had a better OPS plus than Adolis Garcia. Like that's the Braves team 1 through 9 producing better than some of the star players in the league. So they are they're doing great. And yeah, there's not really much of a reason to think that they are going to do much worse. Who do you have in 5th in the NL Central?
Yeah, the NL Central is a very interesting division because it feels like all 5 teams are trying to win right now. The AL Central, it's like, well, the White Sox are a black hole. The Royals, I don't know. And everyone else is also, I don't know. Like, the Guardians and Tigers are both like, they could be good, but they could also not be good. And that kind of leaves the Twins there by default. But the NL Central, all 5 teams feel very competitive this year. And it was tough to pick a 5, but I had to do it. And might not be the hottest take, but I'm going to keep the Pirates there for right now. Sucks because I feel like this team has tried to make a couple steps forward, not necessarily from an organizational ownership or GM standpoint, but the players seem to be taking steps forward, and a full year of O'Neal Cruz is exciting. Brian Reynolds and Ke'Bryan Hayes, who I think can take a major step forward if he pulls his fly balls. McCutchen coming back, who had a very good year last year. I don't love Rowdy Tellez at first, but someone has to play there, and that's whatever. Um, Michael A. Taylor will give him an upgrade defensively in the outfield, and Henry Davis. I'm very excited to see what he can do when they're actually letting him catch full time. In terms of the rotation, yikes. Mitch Keller, I got his extension. I'm happy for him. Jared Jones looked awesome in spring training. He pitched 16 scoreless innings. But after that, it's Martin Perez, Marco Gonzalez, and Luis Ortiz. And you worry about how many innings they're going to get and what they're going to be able to do with those innings and if it's going to cost his team, certainly. In the bullpen, David Bednar, still solid. Aroldis Chapman, very hit or miss, certainly. But yeah, I mean, someone has to finish fifth here. Sucks because I really do want to say the Pirates seem to be taking strides. They were my sleeper team last year, but I still feel like this is the fifth place team.
Yeah, I am gonna agree with you on that. They were dethroned as the NL Central last place champions last year. The Cardinals overtook them. I believe the Pirates will be last place this year because they did have like that win total improvement last year. I think they improved their win total by like 14 games, but in terms of what I'm paying attention to with the Pirates, it's that final 5 months of the season because they had a weird breakout in April last year, but over their final 134 games, they had the second worst record in the National League, and that's kind of the team I'm more looking at. That's kind of more a realistic way to look at the Pirates, and I think there's decent reasons of why the rest of the NL Central could do better than them. I think I see just more general upside in the rest of the NL Central than I do with the Pirates. So that's why I have them in last. Who do you have in fourth?
Yeah, in fourth, this is where I put the St. Louis Cardinals. I know they made some additions, but that Sonny Gray injury really, really hurts. I don't know if he's gonna miss a ton of time. It sounds like he's scheduled to pitch in a minor league game this week, so hopefully only missing a couple starts through the rotation. But you really start to see how bad that rotation looks when you get rid of that ace pitcher. And it's kind of the same thing we thought of them before they got Sonny Gray, right? Like they have Miles Michaelis starting opening day against the Dodgers. Zach Thompson they have in their number two. Is he pitching the second game? Is that actually a thing that's happening? I don't know, but that's what Fangraphs projects. Other than that, Lance Lynn, Steven Matz, Kyle Gibson, not a single guy you feel like you can really rely on among those five. You would rely on Gray, but unfortunately, he's not going to be pitching for them. In the offense, I don't know. Like Paul Goldschmidt, I'm still very high on. Nolan Gorman was interesting last year. I did speak on the potential Nolan Arenado downfall. I feel like last year might be an indicator of what is to come. The only like position player that I feel like you can truly rely on all sides of the field is Paul Goldschmidt right now. You wonder how much he can carry an entire lineup. You need to see steps forward from guys like Gorman, like Dylan Carlson, Brendan Donovan, Mason Wynn, Jordan Walker, absolutely. There's certainly a lot of potential there, but I definitely question how many of those guys can take a step forward and how much they can carry the offense with that pitching staff. The bullpen looks interesting with Palante or with not Palante. I mean, yes, Palante, but Helsley. Palante is interesting for maybe not productive reasons, but for batted ball reasons. Yeah, I don't know. I still don't really believe in this team too much right now. I'm gonna have to stick them in fourth place.
Right.
Yeah, worth noting, Lars Nootbaar and Tommy Edman both injured right now. Nootbaar unfortunately has just not been able to stay on the field really ever.
Yeah, it is unfortunate because there are some cool things about him.
Mm-hmm.
My fourth place team is going to be the Reds.
Wow.
Because yeah, maybe I'm just slowing down the hype train a bit here because I think like yeah, kind of similar to the Tigers, there's a lot of fun things about them and a lot of reasons to be excited about them. But I just remember how who's calling me? I think it's the Red Cross. They always want to take my blood. Shout out to the shout out to blood donations, but I'm not even eligible to give blood right now. But nonetheless, speaking of blood, the Reds.
No, it's dude. It's the what do you mean? It's the Red Cross. You're talking about the Reds in fourth. They're pissed.
I did name drop them, and yeah, they're like, what the heck? I mean, like
that's their team. It has the name in it.
Yeah, their alternate jerseys is just filled with donated blood.
Plus signs.
Yeah. Um, but but regarding the Cincinnati Reds, a lot of things. So yeah, let's remember how surprising it was that they were doing as well as they were last year, and like why it was surprising because the things did look bleak. I will say their current core is pretty inspiring. And I do like the addition of Jamer Candelario, but also like Noel V. Marte is going to be suspended, and that's not a great sign. I'm not sure if Matt McClain is going to live up to the rate statistics that he had last year. Um, Ellie De La Cruz, he has some question marks, obviously. Like people who know ball know the problems with Elliot De La Cruz. Um, and yeah, like their pitching is obviously filled with question marks as well. And I think we're gonna be reminded of why last year was such a surprise for them. Because yeah, a lot of things had to go right for them to be above 500 last year. And I think they may see some bumps in the road this year. And things may not go necessarily all the way their way again this season. But with their young core, I wouldn't be crazy surprised to see me be wrong on this. Who is your number 3 team in the NL Central?
Yeah, my number 3 team is the Milwaukee Brewers. They're coming off another weird season, and they have like the weirdest assortment of players I've ever seen. Like I have no idea if this team is good or not, to be completely honest. You look at the lineup, right? Garrett Mitchell, guy that doesn't have a lot of experience, you don't know what he's gonna do. William Contreras, solid but needs to hit more fly balls. Christian Yelich, solid, not the guy they signed him to be, but still solid. Reese Hoskins, good addition. Willie Adames, been pretty consistent over the last few years. And then Sal Frelick, Gary Sanchez, Jackson Chourio, Bryce Terang, and obviously the name that sticks out there is Jackson Chourio. Just turned 20 years old and is going to be making his major league debut. It was officially announced that he made the opening day roster. Yeah, dude, March 11th, 2004 is his birthday. That's crazy. I was about to turn 4 years old when Jackson Chourio was born. Now he's about to be playing for the Milwaukee Brewers on opening day. So that's super fun and exciting. Um, yeah, and then you look at the rotation, like, Freddie Peralta leading this rotation is pretty awesome. You'll like to see that. And after that, it's what, like Joe Ross, Jacob Junis, DL Hall. And it's like, so what am I like supposed to think of this? Colin Rhea as well. Like, hard to say. Unfortunately, the Devin Williams injury, as well as the Brandon Woodruff injury, really sets them back. To be fair, they signed Brandon Woodruff knowing he was going to be injured, but Trevor McGill looks interesting as closer. So does Abner Uribe. So they have a lot of interesting options in the bullpen, and I don't think the bullpen will be a problem. But everything else, like I said, weirdest assortment of players I've ever seen, and I feel like they could finish last and they could surprise people and finish first, and I have no idea. So I'm gonna go the safe route and put him third.
Yeah, right. With who I have finishing third in the NL Central is the Cardinals, who you have in fourth. I kind of have the Cardinals as like opposite of the Reds. A lot of things had to go wrong for them to be in the position they were last year as a 71 win team. Like, I had them as first in the NL Central. I think a lot of people had them as first in the NL Central last year, but they underperformed by probably like 20 wins last year. They were pretty bad. So, I would not be surprised to see some bounce backs from guys like Arenado and Goldschmidt. I wouldn't be surprised to see kind of a breakout from Nolan Gorman. When Lars Nootbaar comes back on the field, I wouldn't be surprised to see a breakout out of him. I will say, obviously their pitching still looks shaky, especially with the absence of Sonny Gray to start the year. But at least maybe contrary to last year, their starters could get some innings to save the bullpen a little bit, which does add some value. Not a crazy amount, but it does add some value and works out for the long term. So, I think the Cardinals will be a fairly middling team this year, as opposed to last place team last year. Who do you have in second?
Yeah, second, this is where I put the Cincinnati Reds. The thing to remember about the Reds is that they shouldn't have been that good last year, and you obviously mentioned it, but I think there's a lot of addition by subtraction this year. You go ahead and look at what they did last year. They had 30 or 33 games, I believe, that were started by Luke Weaver and Ben Lively. who each put up a 67 and 85 ERA plus collectively. And you look at that and think that's not something they're going to have this year. Ideally, if things go right, they obviously had a lot of injuries happen last year, but they also gave 253 plate appearances to Kevin Newman, right, who had a 81 OPS plus. They gave 149 to Jose Barrero, 199 to Luke Maley, 141 to Will Myers, who had a 46 OPS plus. Like they gave a lot of plate appearances to guys who just shouldn't have had him. 330 to Nick Senzel with his 85 weighted runs created plus. 255 to Stuart Fairchild with his 90. I don't know what Tyler Stevenson is going to be doing if he's still catching. They have him still catching. So who knows what happens there. But this is a team that is going to have a lot more plate appearances allocated to guys who I think actually deserve them, right? You look up and down this lineup, Jonathan India, who has had like the weirdest last year in terms of potential trades and everything that's gone on there. He's going to be leading off and playing second according to Fangraphs. De La Cruz, I think will be some sort of in the middle of what he was last year, still very exciting. Is going to strike out a lot, but it's what he does when he's not striking out that kind of matters. Spencer Steer had an interesting year last year. Christian Encarnacion Strand, like I said, 35 home run potential. Matt McClain is unfortunately starting the year on the injured list. Nick Lodolo, unfortunately, is he coming back soon? Looks like he's gonna pitch in a minor league game on March 26th. So Nick Lodolo hopefully coming back soon as well. Hunter Green ideally taking a step forward. I think adding Frankie Montas to that rotation is huge, even if he might not pitch well in Cincinnati. He really only has a good track record of pitching well in Oakland. That's a lot more innings to a guy that's better than guys like Weaver and Lively. Andrew Abbott looked interesting last year, and he could take a step forward. So did Brennan Williamson. They added Nick Martinez. I think, and David Bell did a great job managing a team that underwent a lot of chaos last year. So I think this team looks a lot better on paper. And if they play the right way, I think second place is a good projection.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, nonetheless, a pretty exciting team. They've run well on the bases. I think they played some decent defense as well last year. Like they're just a fun team. Hopefully continue to be that way this upcoming year. My number, who I have in second place, is the Brewers. I don't see them repeating as division champions, as there's not been a repeat NL Central champion in since the 2016 to 17 Cubs.
Wow.
Because I'm 0 for 4 so far on NL Central winner predictions, and hoping to break that streak, but I'm terrible at predicting the NL Central as of late. So, or as of the whole history of the show. So, take everything I say in the NL Central with a very small grain of salt. But nonetheless, why I have the Brewers in second place? I'll talk about the negatives first with, losing Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff for the year. Going to be a pretty big blow because it sets back their rotation and sets back their strongest part of their roster, arguably. It sets them back pretty far. Also with Devin Williams on the IL, like they have, arguably the best closer in baseball, but he's going to be on the shelf. He's going to be on the IL for about 3 months. And then offensively, they kind of have to rely on a few breakouts to be good. I think they were at a 94 team OPS plus last year, which is, if you don't know, 6% below league average. So, a lot of things to be pessimistic about with the Brewers, but I think I mentioned with the Brewers, like with that offense, there is a lot of potential for it to be above average. Like Rhys Hoskins in there adds a good bit. You don't know what you're going to get out of Jackson Choria, whether it be good or bad. So that's, a potential positive there. Sal Frelick could make some strides forward. Garrett Mitchell could make some strides forward. Who else am I missing? William Contreras, like if he continues what he does, that's very cool. If Christian Yelich, continues to bounce back, that's a very good sign. But, nonetheless, you kind of have to rely on some breakouts, and that's why I have them below the Cubs. I see some regression from them overall this year. Now on to the Cubs. Why do you have them as NL Central champions?
Yeah, I think this is the third year in a row that we've picked the same NL Central champion. I was 2 for 2 between 2020 and 21. But yeah, picked the Brewers in 2022, the Cardinals last year. Was wrong on both of those. But I think the Cubs have a very complete lineup. You look at everyone that's projected to be there, and it all makes sense. I don't need to go through all the individual names, but everyone you can at least see, being worthy of a spot in that lineup right now. The rotation, Justin Steele got hit by a comebacker the other day, but he seems to be all right, which is very good. Kyle Hendricks very quietly had like his best year in a while last year, so I'm excited to see what he can do, given another year in the rotation. I'm excited to see full years of guys like Jordan Wicks and Javier Assad to see if they could break out. The bullpen looks really good with Adbert Alzolay, my 2021 Cubs player to watch, at the top of it. Julian Merriweather, my 2024 player to watch, in it as well. So I'm excited to see what this team can do this year. They have P. Crow Armstrong as well, likely coming up at some point, at least to be a defensive replacement, if not anything else. And then maybe finding his way into that lineup. So yeah, I don't know. I am excited about the Cubs this year. I do have them winning the division.
Right, right. Yeah, I have the Cubs winning the division as well. Try not to pick a repeat champion because there just hasn't been. And yeah, it just seems like things are pointing to it being the Cubs' year. It was like, it was almost their year to be in the playoffs after a couple year drought last year, but they kind of fell apart at the end. But I'm not going to hold that against them for this year because that would be kind of silly. With the Cubs, they're returning a very similar roster to last year. I think the Shota Imanaga signing should make up for losing Marcus Stroman, and with all things considered, could be an upgrade over Stroman. Who knows? Pitching and defense combined looks very strong, and I say that like you got Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner in the middle there, which is really really good to have, and it's good to have good defense behind that starting rotation specifically because they're not really a high strikeout bunch necessarily. So them having good pitching and defense behind them is good overall. And overall last year the Cubs had a 110 team ERA plus. That's very very good to have as a team as a whole. Their lineup as a whole isn't very star-studded, but doesn't really have holes in it. Like, I don't think there's really an objectively bad hitter in the Cubs lineup, or at least of their projections. And then last thing I'll say, look out for Michael Busch. He had a 1049 OPS in the minors last year. He's Fangraphs projected number 6 hitter in the lineup. Didn't have major league success, but it was only 27 games. And the Dodgers have notoriously, although they've had really good organizational success, have shipped off a couple like really good players in Yordan Alvarez and O'Neill Cruz. Maybe Michael Busch is that next guy. Who knows? I don't know. But that's pure speculation. But I think he's a dark horse candidate for even like rookie of the year and just being a good overall productive hitter for the Cubs. So look out for that guy. Look out for that name, Michael Busch. So yeah, the Cubs we both have as champions. Also, and shout out to Pete Crow Armstrong. He might be coming up this year too. He's a pretty well-rated prospect. Now on to the final division here. We'll start with last place. I don't really have too much to say about them. It's the Rockies. Last year, all I really have to say about the Rockies, a pretty fun stat. Last year, they were the only team with a team OPS plus and team ERA plus below 90. So they were the only team to be over 10% below league average at both run prevention and OPS. So shout out to the Rockies for that. But yeah, they're pretty objectively the worst team in the NL West, and I can't really see anything that points differently. Anything more to add on your last place team?
Yes, I do. Did you see that article in The Athletic a few weeks ago that said that Chris Bryant regretted signing with the Rockies?
I did not know.
So he said, he wanted to win, believe it or not. And he said, I guess I didn't do as much research into the prospects as I could. Essentially, he signed with the Rockies because they made him believe, like, the guys that are coming through the system right now, like, you're going to win with them. And, well, we're now in, year 3 now? And they haven't. And it doesn't really seem like they're going to anytime soon. especially because all of the other teams have gotten so much better since. Um, so that's, a bit unfortunate for them. But yeah, I mean, if you need anything on the state of the Rockies, there it is right there. I don't know, like the less said about this team, the better. I mean, I'm gonna be excited watching what other offenses do against this rotation for sure,
Yeah,
especially on like Cal Quantrill, Dakota Hudson days.
there might be some 20 run games, which is pretty fun.
Yeah,
Um, Also, yeah, shout out Nolan Jones. He's pretty cool. Hoping for like 4 wins above replacement,
he
specifically
is
on
pretty
fan
cool.
drafts.
Yeah, you
Um,
specifically.
that would be pretty cool if he had a nice season. I'm not asking for much, but like four
Yeah,
WAR.
I will give the Rockies this. I think they're gonna play some awesome defense.
Oh yeah, shout out Brenton Doyle. Like he's
Yeah,
a
shout out Brenton Doyle. Shout out to Nolan Jones's arm. Shout out to Ezekiel Tovar. Um, this team is gonna play some awesome defense, I believe.
yeah,
Uh,
that's
Everything
cool.
else, I don't know. Probably not anything to write home about.
Yeah, that's a yikes from me, dog. My so yeah, now on to the rest of the National League West. All teams that I think are really, really interesting, and I think 2 through 4 in the NL West is very, very intriguing. And this is where I kind of talk about like similar to the Rangers. I kind of talk about I I talk about a team who like maybe this is a shocker for some people, but just based on what they did in the regular season last year, shouldn't be too much of a shocker. And I'm talking about the Diamondbacks in my 4th place spot. And this is me. I'm not even really pessimistic on the Diamondbacks. I'm just more optimistic about the Padres, Giants, and Dodgers and what they potentially bring to the table. Um, with the Diamondbacks, maybe talking pessimistically about them, it's easy to forget that they were an 84 win team last year that scored less runs than they gave up. They went deep in the World Series, but that's not necessarily something that's gonna translate over to regular season 2024 success. Might even take away from it. Who knows? Along with that, um, speaking optimistically about them, I do like the additions of Eduardo Rodriguez, Eugenio Suarez, and Jock Peterson. I know Erod's starting the year on the IL, but I'm sure he'll come around. However, I do kind of envision a similar or worse record than they had last year. So, yeah, with the Diamondbacks, maybe that's a hot take for some folks, but considering what they did last year, I don't think it's crazy. On to your number 4 pick in the NL West.
Yeah, I'm sticking with you on that one. Yeah, I'm also picking the Diamondbacks. Shout out to us for being down on the World Series teams from last year. Um, yeah, I mean the Diamondbacks are essentially bringing back the same team from last year. A couple additions. They are bringing in Jock Peterson. They're bringing in Eugenio Suarez. They are bringing in Erod. I'm hoping that guys like Brandon Pfaadt and Ryan Nelson take steps up in that rotation. But if they don't, it's going to be a real concerning time for them, I think. Yeah, I mean, like, I just feel more optimistic on the other 3 teams, kind of as you said. I think Corbin Carroll will be awesome, like he always, like he was last year. I think Christian Walker will play some solid defense and hit well above average for his position. Um, but other than that, I don't know. There just doesn't feel like feels like I mean, obviously, like I hate run differential, but they did have a negative run differential last year. They only won 84 games. They barely made the playoffs. And if they win a couple of games less, that's absolutely reasonable enough for 4th best in this division because there are 3 solid teams, I think. Other than them. So yeah, I put the Diamondbacks in 4th as well.
Yeah, right. And that isn't even a knock. Like I appreciated what the Diamondbacks front office did this year. Like they did what they should have. They added some guys that they could afford to improve the team. But I don't think it'll make enough of an impact compared to what the Giants and Padres and obviously Dodgers will do. My 3 pick for the NL West is the San Francisco Giants, who we talked about earlier in the episode because of Blake Snell signing. There's a lot to like from what they did in the offseason, as I mentioned before. Won't go too deep, but they upgrade their outfield with Jung Hoo Lee, their lineup with Jorge Soler. They upgrade their third base position with Matt Chapman, and they upgrade their rotation with Blake Snell, Robbie Ray and possibly Jordan Hicks. That rotation could look really good with Alex Cobb when he returns. Like you got Logan Webb, Blake Snell, maybe Alex Cobb, and then Robbie Ray and Jordan Hicks. Like that could be a really good rotation there. That could play well to the Oracle Park there as well. So yeah, they made some solid additions. They kind of did what they needed to do. And I could see them finishing higher than third, but I do have them in third because of what I like from the other teams. Who do you have in third?
I also have the Giants. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going fully in agreement on the NL West, so I'll keep it brief for timing purposes because we've been going for a while. Yeah, I like the additions the Giants made. I think they're going to slug a lot more this year. I think they're going to play a lot better defense. I think they're going to have a little more depth in that rotation because you have Webb, you have Snell, which is awesome. They're trying Jordan Hicks as a starter. We'll see how long that experiment lasts, but you're getting more innings out of Kyle Harrison. You're getting more innings ideally out of guys like Keaton Wynn, maybe Tristan Beck if he comes back. I know he did just have surgery, so who knows there. But then Alex Cobb and Robbie Ray, when they come back, Robbie Ray will definitely be back a little later because he got Tommy John in May of last year. But bullpen also looks pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie, Camilo Doval closing obviously, but then the Rogers twins, Luke Jackson, Ryan Walker, very interesting names all around. Yeah, I mean, this team I think could surprise a lot of people. I don't want to say it because I was much higher on them back then, but this feels very 2021-esque with how people looked at them preseason.
Right. Yeah. Like just some things being fixed around kind of under the hood. My who I have in second place is the San Diego Padres, which might be a hot take for some folks considering like yeah, they were very disappointed last year. Kind of had I would say a net negative offseason. Like that's gonna naturally happen when you let go of Juan Soto. But we talk about run differential and how we don't rely on it too hard, but you can't really ignore it with the San Diego Padres and what happened to them last year, or what they did last year. Like they underperformed their Pythagorean win-loss by 10 wins. They were 2-12 in extra innings and 9-23 in one-run games. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the lack of luck, but it's a projection that it sort of makes you realize like okay, they do have the potential to do a lot better than they did last year overall record wise. Like it's hard not to identify that. Like if a couple bounces go a couple different ways and in extra innings or one run games, they're a playoff team last year. So that's hard not to recognize. Now I also, just with individual players, I expect some offensive bounce backs from potentially Manny Machado, definitely Fernando Tatis Jr., and potentially also Jake Cronenworth, who was a below average hitter last year, which was kind of surprising to me. I think Yu Darvish can bounce back. I know his peripherals definitely suggest that. And also Dylan Cease and Michael King can add a lot to that rotation. Like, that Juan Soto deal isn't great for the Padres, but I think getting Michael King out of that was a pretty cool thing for them to do because of how great he looked in his final 8 starts of the year. But yes,
Yeah.
I got the Padres fairly optimistic about them. What do you or yeah, who's your second
Yes.
place
My
team?
second place team is the Padres. Shocking, I know, but
Yeah.
the team of shortstops is going to be very interesting. Every single person that they played in the field and even just in the lineup in the 2 Korea series games were converted shortstops, and then also Luis Campusano. Apparently Austin Nola played shortstop in the minors, so I think they got to get him back. And truly, and then also find a starting pitcher that used to be a shortstop somehow, and field the whole team of shortstops. I don't really know where they're gonna find the last, but um, yeah, I mean, this is a very top heavy team, I think, when you look at the lineup, but there is so much potential out of Bogarts, Tatis, Cronenworth, Machado, and then maybe even Ha-Sung Kim from a defensive perspective and maybe slightly above average offensive perspective. I'm interested to see what turns out of this bullpen. It looks like Robert Suarez is going to be getting save opportunities because he did in Korea. This looks like a pretty complete rotation, at least with Darvish, Musgrove, Cease, King, and then Matt Waldron, definitely going to be a very exciting guy to watch, the knuckleballer. They said it couldn't exist anymore, but we're so back with knuckleballers in 2024. Yeah, I think this is a team that could surprise a lot of people. And I'll have more to say on them later.
Yeah, I'm so excited for the modern knuckleballer where every every classic person is gonna be like, how's that for spin rate, huh? How's that?
Exit velocity, but for spin rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be rough. But also it's gonna be funny to people be like, how is it 405 RPM? It's like, yeah, it's per minute. It takes like less than a second to get there. That's
Yeah.
why the
Yeah.
spin rate is as high as it is. But yeah, I will read. And finally on to the last team to get to here, and that's the Los Angeles Dodgers, who I don't really have anything much to say on. It's pretty obvious why they would be, overwhelming National League West favorites, overwhelming, National League 1 seed favorites, and overwhelming like World Series favorites. And that is because they were already a 100 win team last year, and they added the 2 biggest free agents in baseball, one of them being a generational or beyond generational talent, and then the other being the best Japanese pitching prospect maybe ever. And then yeah, they also added Tyler Glasnow to go with that, who you could argue was the best trade target out there, maybe competitive with Corbin Burns, of course. But yeah, like that's what you have with the Dodgers, and they didn't really lose anybody either. So yeah, they're pretty much a dead set favorite. I'd be shocked if they didn't win this.
I'd be astonished if they didn't win this. Yeah, I don't know. It goes without saying. They have maybe the best trio of 3 hitters back to back to back that we've seen like post World War II. Um, like not even the Murderers Row Yankees had a third guy that was like on the level of Betts, Ohtani, Freeman. Like they had 2 guys that were above that level, but they didn't have a third guy that was at that level. So who knows? Who knows how historic of a lineup this is? And then the supporting cast is all solid. Will Smith, Max Muncy, Teoscar Hernandez, James Outman, to name a few. Glass now, if he stays healthy, is a Cy Young candidate, I believe. Yamamoto, I'm sure people are going to overreact to his first start, where he struggled. Good F4 outing, not a bad F4 outing at all. But obviously, struggled to locate. I think, the more he pitches, he'll get better because the pretty clear issue was the command in that first start if you watch it back. And I think it was just nerves more than anything else. So I do believe he'll be fine. I'm not worried about him yet. But we'll just have to see what happens. Like if you look at the pitch chart, there was not much competitive pitching going on here.
Right, right. Also, like people might also point out his spring training ERA, which was I think over
A
8.
five, yeah, he had like a 560 BABIP against.
His spring training FIP was low 2s. I was very like after because yeah, in our F4 draft I drafted him, and I didn't know that, but when I like look back to see like potential vindication of my picks, and I saw 203 FIP in the spring training, I was like, "Whoo, look at that." That's fun. Not that I
Good
really.
thing this is the F4 league, not the B4 league.
Yeah, good thing. That would work great in my favor if it just continued to work that way.
Yeah.
But he could.
So do we want to get into standings predictions now in terms of the seeding?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll start with the American League. At number 1, I have the Baltimore Orioles repeating as the number 1 team in the league. Number 2, I have the Seattle Mariners. Number 3, the Minnesota Twins. And then for my wild cards, not too much surprising to start. Number 4, I have the Rays. Number 5, I have the Astros. And at number 6, I have my sleeper team, America's sleeper team, the Detroit Tigers. I don't know who would ever say that they're a trap sleeper team. Don't know what they're talking about. I'm just kidding. Look, I know that the Tigers have put us in this position before after 2021. They were solid, signed Eduardo Rodriguez, signed Javier Baez. What is the difference? Well, I think the difference is that was Alavila's team and this is Scott Harris's team. Getting rid of Alavila was such a huge move for this organization. It was a move that needed to be made years before it actually was made. I trust Scott Harris. I like what he's done with the team so far. I think they have a very good farm system of guys coming up. Um, and it goes pretty deep, right? Like Colt Keith going to start the year in the majors, receive that extension. That's going to give him time to figure his stuff out. I think the rate stats are going to start coming for Spencer Torkelson. I think they're going to start coming for Riley Green. I like the defense that this team could put together in the outfield, especially. And there are even some like kind of lower tier prospects. Not Jace Jung, he's definitely not one of them. He's a big name, but there's guys like Sawyer Gibson Long, who pitched well in a few starts last year. Justin Henry Malloy, who played well in AAA last year and hit the ball pretty hard, hit a lot of fly balls as well. Um, I think there's a lot of sneaky good performers on this team. They played pretty well last year from like X date on. Obviously they found their way to second place and work like in kind of competitive playoff hunts at various points throughout the season early on. So I am gonna pick the Tigers as my sleeper team. I get the idea of seeing them as a trap sleeper team because they've put us in this position before. I do see the differences this year though, and I am gonna buy in.
Yeah, and with sleeper teams, it is tough because there's really only ever like maybe 3 or 4 to choose from. So like,
Hmm.
I
Unless you want me to throw out the White Sox, but I'm not gonna do that.
yeah, I totally get.
This team might win 75 games. The White
Yeah,
Sox are my sleeper team.
yeah. Yeah, my seeding goes not really any shockers. I got Astros number 1. I got the Orioles in the 2 spot. I got Twins in the 3. Then Yankees, Mariners, Rays. I have the I think we both have the Rangers outside of the
Yes,
AL playoff picture. So
and
yeah,
the Blue Jays,
and Blue Jays,
in
correct.
terms of team that
Yes.
made it last year.
Um, so yeah, cool that we both have the Mariners in. Um, now your National League.
Yeah, my National League is the Braves number 1, Dodgers number 2, Cubs number 3, Phillies number 4. My sleeper team is the Padres. I'm putting them at number 5, and then the Reds at number 6, which I guess you could substitute either or for a sleeper team. I'm gonna throw the Padres in there though.
Yeah, yeah. My number 1 is Dodgers, number 2 Braves, 3 Cubs, 4 Phillies, and then I have the Padres and then the Giants as my 6th seed.
I
Uh,
almost went Giants over Reds. I went back and forth between them for a while, so we almost had the exact same seeding minus Dodgers Braves in the NL.
right, right. You have the Braves over the Dodgers.
I did.
All right, yeah. I mean Braves did do it last year.
I like the overall competition in in the Dodgers division more.
All right, yeah, I get that. I get that.
Hmm.
So yeah, now on to awards because they are voted
Yeah.
on prior to the postseason. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, American League Rookie of the Year, who do you got?
So for every award I picked, well, other than Manager of the Year, I picked my actual picks and then the sleeper picks. So my AL Rookie of the Year is going to be Evan Carter. My sleeper pick, I mentioned him earlier, is Justin Henry Malloy from the Tigers. My National League Rookie of the Year is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And my sleeper Rookie of the Year is Hurston Waldrep from the Braves, another pitcher.
Yeah, I got my American League Rookie of the Year is Evan Carter as well. And why I say that, I think we've partially just there's a comfort level because we've already seen him do really well at the MLB level. And although his expected numbers were far below his actual numbers, those expected numbers were still pretty good. And his underlying stuff showed some really interesting things. Great chase rate, great walk rate, great sweet spot rate, and above average exit velocity. Um, I chose because he's a favorite, I chose a darker horse, which I'm not
Mhm.
even saying he's a dark horse, but I'm intrigued by Colt Keith. I think he's like 5th in the odds, so it's not necessarily like a crazy, crazy pick, but
Yeah.
it's a darker horse, which is why I categorize it as that. My National League Rookie of the Year is also the favorite, Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Last year, I went with the most obvious choice for National League Rookie of the Year, and it worked. So I'm going to continue that sentiment and pick Yamamoto. Partially just like, yeah, it's a little bit easier for him because he's already had some like similar to MLB level competition, um, similar to MLB level, worlds, with all of that. And I don't really with regarding the rest of the competition, I don't really see crazy immediate success for Jung-Hoo Lee. I could see Jackson Chorio doing well, but not necessarily breaking out at the plate where it matters a little bit more to voters. I see Imanaga having a tougher adjustment to MLB than Yamamoto, and I like Michael Busch, but lack of defense may not help him out. But that being said, my darker horse is Michael Busch, but I believe Yoshinobu Yamamoto will win.
Not a bad pick though.
Yeah, not the worst. Now on to manager of the year, which we don't really have to get too into.
Yeah, I have AJ Hinch as my manager of the year for the AL. Makes sense, obviously,
It
and then
makes
David Bell
sense.
for the NL.
Yeah, both those would make sense.
Hmm.
My American League manager of the year, I never really have strong like improvements here, but like Scott Service would be my manager of the year because like I think he'd make the most improvement in my hypothetical standings. And he's almost like kind of due to win one. And then National League manager of the year would be Mike Schilt for me because him improving the Padres from an 82 win
Second
team to a playoff team.
five-seeded playoff team. Yeah.
While being a first-year manager, I think would get votes. So yeah, now on to American League Cy Young.
Yeah, American League Cy Young. I'm going with a guy that I spoke very highly of throughout the positional rankings and the top 50. Talking about Pablo Lopez. I think he's going to strike out a lot of batters this year, limit the home run damage, and just do a lot more than he did. My dark horse or darker horse is Grayson Rodriguez. I think with a proper step up and Baltimore working in his favor, there's a lot of potential for him there. For the NL, I'm going with Tyler Glasnow, another guy that I had in my top 50 and my top 10. And for my sleeper, I'm going with his teammate. I'm talking about Bobby Miller.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Yeah, Bobby Miller showed some fun stuff last year.
Mhm.
My American League Cy Young, I'm sticking in the AL Central. I'm going with Tarek Skubal, who I'm not going to act like is a dark horse. Like some people might think, like, oh, because
Mhm.
people haven't really heard his name, he's a dark horse, but he shouldn't really be regarded as a dark horse considering how he performed last year and the innings that he put up. He had a flat 2 FIP last year and a 2.30 expected ERA and 80 in the third innings pitch last year. From the time he debuted through the end of the season, he led all qualifiers in FIP and expected WOBA against, and he was third in strikeout minus walk rate and second in home runs per nine against. And also in his final 8 starts, he averaged 6 innings per game started. I think the Tigers kind of started him out a little bit more carefully coming off the injury, but toward the end, he was getting innings production on top of that amazing underline and just general run prevention numbers as well. So yeah, I mean, just based on how he performed last year, I'm just going with Tarek Skubal. Maybe just like the obvious pick that people aren't thinking is obvious, but I figure I go with him anyway. National
Yeah.
League Cy Young. I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna go with Max Fried again. I've been singing his praises for the past couple months now. As I've rated him the number one pitcher, which is a fairly unpopular take, but I picked him as the Cy Young last year, and he didn't really give me much reason not to double down on him. He's not injured right now, and I don't project him to be injured later this year. I mean, last year he had a 2.55 ERA and 2.73 expected ERA and 77 in the third innings pitched. Also has a 2.66 ERA and 3.03 FIP in the last 4 years. So yeah, like he was excellent in the time he did pitch last year, and if he continues that, I easily see him being a Cy Young favorite. All right, who is your American League MVP?
Yeah. So for my MVP, of course, I've been doing it every year. I gotta keep doing it. I'm going Juan Soto for my MVP pick, this time in the AL. First time I'm picking him for AL MVP. I've picked him every single year. I will keep doing it until he wins it, even if he retires. Uh, he's got to do it at some point because I just know the year that I don't do it, he's gonna do it. So I gotta recognize that. And then for my NL MVP, I know that people have had this take before, but I think 2023 Fernando Tatis Jr. looked a lot like 2022 Ronald Acuna Jr. So I'm gonna take Tatis to have a step up, win MVP. Um, make everyone forget about 2022, hopefully. For my sleeper picks, I'm going with two recent Rookie of the Year winners, going with Gunnar Henderson in the AL and Michael Harris II in the NL.
Hmm. Yeah, my American League MVP is I think your alternate non-Otani pick from last season, Adley Rutschman. I think Adley Rutschman is going to win MVP this year. I've found some really cool I found some things that he did last year pretty cool in terms of underlying stuff. He was the only player last year to be 90th percentile or better in both strikeout rate and walk rate. I mean, no matter what the exit velocity is, that's really good to have. He did underperform his expected metrics last year, so he's due to have better offensive numbers along with pretty good defense. And I think generally speaking, even if he's not necessarily the best player this year, I think the voters would enjoy voting for a great catcher on a winning team. I think that's just an opportunity that the voters would eat up. So
The
I think that
BBWA does love their catchers.
yeah, they do tend to do that, whether it's Hall of Fame, MVP, whatever. National League MVP. Um, this isn't necessarily a hot one here either. I'm going with one of the more offensively consistent players in baseball who's kind of upped his game since he joined his new team, and that's Freddie Freeman. I think he gets his second MVP. He seems to be getting better despite being in his mid 30s. His defense doesn't hold him back too much. I could easily see him with like a 1,000 OPS this year with even like 20 stolen bases again. I mean, the rule changes are staying in place, so I could see a repeat of like a 20 stolen base season with excellent hitting. And then my honorable mention is also Michael Harris II. He's the only guy I really feel
Nice.
honorable mention on, but like the way he finished his season last year really gave me some optimism for him, and the fact that he's also only 23 is also a good sign as well. So yeah, those are all the awards. Now we will get into our weird playoffs here.
Yeah. So
Yeah, wild card round.
AL wildcard round, I have the Twins over the Tigers. I didn't put games, I just put vibes.
Yeah.
Twins over Tigers, and I also have Astros over Rays. And then on the NL side, I have the Cubs over the Reds and the Phillies over the Padres.
Yeah, I have my 3-seeded Twins over my 6-seeded Rays. I think the Twins overcame their thing last year, and the Rays, I think, are notoriously
Are
bad on the road in the
Yeah,
playoffs.
now the ones that have the thing,
Yeah, the Rays are, yeah, almost, especially with full
them and
capacity crowds.
them and the Brewers.
Right, right. And then I have the 5-seeded Mariners taking out the Yankees in the Bronx. I think I had the same prediction last year, so maybe it'll come to
Yeah,
fruition this year.
yeah.
National League wild card, I have the 6-seeded Giants going over the 3-seeded Cubs, whatever. And then I have the 4-seeded Phillies over the 5-seeded Padres because of course.
As do I.
LDS.
Yeah, the LDS, I have the 5-seeded Astros taking down the 1-seeded Orioles. Orioles were the first round exit for the second straight year. I have the Mariners over the Twins, setting up an AL West ALCS. And then I have the Phillies over the Braves again for the third time. Uh, Philadelphia does not stop. And then I have Dodgers over Cubs.
Right. I have in my ALDS, I have the 5-seeded Mariners taking down the 1-seeded Astros because I feel like
Yeah.
there's just some unfinished business from their 2022 ALDS. And then I have the Orioles going over the Minnesota Twins, making for an Orioles Mariners ALCS. Then in the NLDS, I have the Phillies beating the Dodgers because it's the Dodgers, and it's far away enough to where I can predict the Dodgers massively failing in the playoffs. And then but I do have to alternate the trend here. I have the Braves winning over the Giants because I think the Braves are just, too much better than the Giants for that stigma to take over. So it's going to be Phillies, Braves, NLCS. So now on to LCS.
Yeah, so I have the Astros over the Mariners. You have the opposite in the DS. I have this on the CS, and then I have the Phillies over the Dodgers. I am delaying the Dodgers choke for one round. I think Shohei Ohtani puts them over the top to get them into the NLCS. So I have a 2022 World Series rematch with the Astros and the Phillies.
Love to see it. Love to see it. My ALCS is the 5-seeded Mariners defeating the 2-seeded Orioles. I did
Wow,
say,
you're the Mariners guy now.
yeah, look at me go. Yeah, I said this is the year I stop underestimating the Orioles, but that could be wrong because I don't have them like winning the World Series. And then the NLCS, I delayed my Braves choke to the NLCS, and I have the Phillies over the Braves in that respect. So I have the Phillies and Mariners taking on each other in the World Series. Who
Very
do you
fun.
have winning the World Series?
I have the Phillies getting the upper hand on Houston this year. Philadelphia's going all the way. We're gonna finally have Bryce Harper get his ring. Dave Dombrowski's gonna win a World Series with his third team. Tigers are gonna be even more sad. Sorry, Tigers. I know I just talked you up into being my sleeper team, but I have to remind you that Dave Dombrowski is gonna win another one this year.
Yeah, I have the Phillies also. Look at
Yep.
us go.
We how many years have we had the same World Series like winner? I feel like it always happens.
Well,
It's
it
happened
was
multiple times, I think.
definitely last year. I think the year before we had the same World Series matchup, but a different winner. I think it was Dodgers Blue Jays, and I had Dodgers and you had Blue Jays, I think.
Yeah, we both had Dodgers Rays in 2020. Did we both have the Braves in 21?
No,
Oh,
I
I
had
did.
I had Dodgers White Sox, I think, and you had
I had
Braves.
Braves White Sox. And then I
Um,
had Blue Jays Giants in 2022, I believe.
uh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we could listen back. I did listen back a little bit to our 2020 prediction because that was like the last time we did a prediction show on Zoom. Um,
Wow, that is true.
yeah, it's normally in person, but yeah, now no longer in college and
Yeah.
pretty far away. But yeah, that shall do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio, our annual prediction show extravaganza, little state of the union of the game of baseball, or at least the MLB as a whole. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you maybe made it to the end. Who knows? But if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. Check out all the cool features of it, the playlists. Check out the guest interviews. We still, we still got interviews of Jeff Passan, Chris Rose, Foolish Bailey up there, Sarah Langs, Mike Petriello, among others. Those are some timeless classics, so make sure to check those out. And also follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking some Major League Baseball action for the first time, or for our first
Yes,
time.
we will. We would be talking about active Major League Baseball games next time.
Yeah, delivering some how about that's and slightly
Yes,
wrong ones.
sir.
Maybe some overreactions, hoping they go better than last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that shall do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We will see you next time.
This conversation is over.
Is over.